Have anybody, any good committee members online?
Doesn't look like it.
Here's Jim.
Okay.
And
Jim, yours MSO is the one with the little sticky on it.
Thank you.
And then this, the other material Bob told me he sent just recently, so we made copies.
One of these. One of each of these.
Yes.
There's three.
John, are you there?
I'm here.
Could you send Steph an email with today's agenda and ask her to print some copies, please?
Okay.
Hold on, I can call her, but she's probably gonna have,
You're home.
she's not gonna know where that agenda is.
24 below coming in today.
I can send her an agenda.
Oh,
That's perfect.
What they call it chilly up here.
We just don't have any printed agendas here.
No, home for a couple of weeks and it was a bit of us.
Mr. Scott, how are you doing today? Right? Yeah, there's a children one out there.
Yeah. I just say, where do we live, you know, so. If it's 5 below or 25 below, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
No.
I was surprised. They do a Bible study on Friday mornings. 6:30 in the morning, and 5 of my guys showed up this morning. Didn't expect to have anybody there.
We got 2 visitors here.
Yeah. You're in the city after.
Oh, our chores done and we're good to go. There you go. Yep. And my dog from Nova Scotia, yesterday for a while doing some stuff and eventually he wanted to go in. I think his feet were hurting.
I believe it. And then, how are you?
Good.
Hey, Tom. All right.
It's a easy copy of the minutes of the public meeting.
Mike, morning.
Morning.
Do we know what the last name is of Karen and Scott? Is that Woodhull?
I don't know.
Michelle?
With testimony, we'll ask their name and address. Remind me to do that.
Michelle, can you hear me?
She stepped away for a minute, Jonna.
Oh, okay. I guess she can't hear me.
Howdy. Morning. I don't know. Huh?
That's the big use of also fabulous. Watch your reaction.
Thank you.
It's actually. But when I remember shoveling it.
I'll wait for Michelle to come back and we'll start.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, John.
Great, thank you. There were so many different emails. I had a little difficulty sorting out the agenda from the rest. My apologies for being late.
That's okay. We had a few technical problems this morning.
Everyone ready?
Ready?
All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order today, Conservation Job Extension Education Committee. We're meeting in committee room 2 of the courthouse and virtually by Zoom. Friday, January 21st, it's a little after about 9:05 right now. Meeting has been properly posted and is handicap accessible to this particular room. I have some announcements of procedure. Eventually, we're going to have each of the committee members talk about the purpose of the ordinance and also your feelings regarding the public comment that was received January 5th, right? And we'll go around and have each person comment about what they think the purpose of the ordinance was originally and feelings regarding the public comment. Later, I'm going to ask each committee member and Michelle and Carl, and that would be part of the first one as well, to suggest changes to improve the ordinance or revise it in any way, considering the comments that we heard and so on. And then we'll talk about new action and the next actions we're going to take. We'll talk about our future meetings and what might be part of those. And wrap it up then. That'll be our meeting today. So I would call for approval of today's agenda.
So moved. Second.
Moved and
Seconded.
seconded. Today's agenda, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay, motion carries. If we look at the minutes that were distributed by Mary on about the Manure storage ordinance public hearing held January 5th. Any comments, any additions, changes, alterations to those? If you want to take a minute and look at them again. And then I'll entertain a motion to approve. I didn't see that.
Doesn't appear to be.
Any corrections or additions to the minutes? Okay. Yeah, I entertain a motion then to approve these minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve this, as stated. I'll second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the MSO public hearing of January 5th, 2022. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Dates and locations of future meetings. I think we'll take a look at that at the end of our meetings today. Electronic signature for meetings attended virtually. Someone will make a motion for that.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded to approve electronic signature for meetings attended virtually. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, hearing none, motion carries. All right, we'll to the public comment portion of the meeting. If you give public comment at today's meeting, please state your name clearly and also your address. Anyone on Do you want to give a public comment today?
We were just here, I'm sorry, Cindy and Larry Eckhart, 8367 County K in Harshaw. We're hobby farmers, and we're just here to oppose, I guess, the manure management or storage issue.
I've been around the farming business 70+ years, and this is for against this ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Anyone on, no one else who, or Scott, you want to give a comment?
Maybe later.
Yeah,
I do have some comment. I also would like to know, point of order, Chairman Mott. Will I be allowed to interact during the meeting since I was involved? Or should I get all my comments in right now?
you can comment during the time we're discussing certain points if you'd like to.
Okay.
You can wait till the end to comment, considering what's being said today. And any committee member that would like to call on Tom, I don't know, Dan Butkus is on as well, I guess he is, concerning anything in the ordinance that they helped draft, you certainly can.
Okay, so I have a couple of comments,
Okay,
in addition to the ones I had at the hearing. One, there is some talk, and there continues to be talk about putting animal units on this ordinance, which is extremely difficult to do with the manure ordinance. And the other thing that you run afoul with, you then become a CAPO ordinance. And you're back to debt cuts, and the requirements for CAPO in connecting to the state regulations on CAPO are much greater and much more, they give you more guidance. So I'm not even sure that we would be able to get approval from DATCAP on a manure ordinance that had animal units associated with it. Now, you could look at sizes, and I have some comments about that, the size of the manure pile or storage unit. But it's really, at least from the way I understand it, problematic to put animal units on there. I did see Mr. Fugel's response to Carl Jenrich about the statutory comments that Mr. Sweeney had, and he had some good comments, and I'm going to cover some of that. But I would agree that the reason we sent this ordinance to DevCap and DNR for approval was to make sure that we were synced with the statutory language that's out there on both farming and manure storage ordinances. And you know, we did get input from both agencies and made some changes. So we should be in sync with other statutes related to farming, including the right to farm law. I'd like to address that because we had a lot of comments about it. The right to farm law prevents, as Mr. Fugel pointed out, a nuisance lawsuit. And in terms of this regulation, it is already illegal to discharge manure to waters of the state. And we're simply enacting an ordinance that will work in concert with NRCS, DATCAP, and DNR to help farmers not get in trouble with the state law as it relates to manure. The way I look at our ordinance is or the proposed ordinance, is that it's, instead of being reactive, it's proactive. We're trying to help farmers comply with the law in advance so they don't get into problems. And that wasn't on Michelle's difference between the state and the county regulation. The county regulation requires some permitting, and that permitting is focused on keeping people in compliance rather than the state. They're reactive. They're not going to come in until there's a problem or a complaint, And then it's a much more adversarial relationship. Whereas I look at our ordinance as trying to help farmers comply with keeping manures out of the waters of the state. And most of our farmers, including Mr. Sweeney, do a really good job of that. Now, back to the ordinance. It really, and at least in my mind, has very little impact on the existing farms in Oneida County because most of them do a really good job of managing the manure. And I'll use the Camp Ford Farms as an example. They're able to store their manure outside of the water quality management area that's listed in our code. No permitting, no reason for Michelle to visit the farm unless there were a complaint about manure getting into water. Absolutely nothing he has to do different than what he's currently doing to comply with the ordinance. The one thing that it does require is manure spreading twice a year. In other words, you can't accumulate it for more than 180 days. So in the realm of helping the small farmer, I'd be totally okay, and I haven't talked to Dan Butkus or anybody else about this, with once per year for a smaller manure pile. I think you back to the days when I lived on a farm, you know, it was a hobby, not a hobby farm, it was a subsistence farm. I had 7 brothers and sisters, so we had to have a cow and a pig and chickens. And we cleaned out the stalls and piled it, and in the spring, we got rid of the manure. So I'd be totally okay with reducing that requirement to once per year. There was some comments from Mr. Sweeney about the covered pile. The one thing I would say about the covered pile, say you had a small farm, a hobby farm, or a subsistence farm, or even a small producer, and they didn't have any land outside of a water quality management zone. We put this in there specifically, the covered manure pile provision in there specifically, so they wouldn't have to get a permit in those conditions. All they have to do in those conditions is cover the pile and keep the rain off of it, so it doesn't drain into the lake or stream that it's near. So that was, in my mind, something that we put in to help the small producer. One other thing. Oh, so Mr. Sweeney commented about all manure piles. You know, and there's no size limit on it. He's talked about, well, if it's 1 cup a pile of manure, and I'd be okay if we changed that provision to match the rest of the code, 175 cubic feet of manure, which is 1 manure spreader. Look up the requirement here. Well, those are 2 things that I thought could be done to lessen the impact on the small farmers, but I really am concerned about an effort to put an animal unit size on this manure ordinance. A, it's really difficult to do, and B, then you get into the realm of CAFO regulations, which isn't good. The last thing I wanted to say on this was when the county enacted the manure ordinance, or the moratorium on CAFOs, in that action, they referred back to committee this job of putting together a manure storage ordinance. So the committee did that. And to me, some type of ordinance needs to be and it was approved with all aides. Everyone voted in favor of it. So to me, some type of report back from the committee to the full county board is in order. And I in favor, of course. From the south.
Yep.
Jonna, can you hear me or can anybody hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay, we just lost video. I'm not sure why, but as long as everyone can still hear.
You're back.
I have everybody up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just not sure what's going on, as long as everybody's still there.
It's a little difficult to hear, folks. I heard Tom's comments, but you could speak into the mics or.
Want me to move over there?
Sure. We're gonna bring them up front here, John.
Yeah, did you have more to say, Tom?
So the last thing I wanted to say was that this, the moratorium referred the manure storage ordinance back to the committee. And I feel that it needs to go to county board for action, or at least a report. I think that's only fair since the full county board voted to draft a manure storage ordinance. You need to do something there to address that, in my opinion. And John, just for the two things I talked about to make it a little easier on a small operator, there was all manure stacks in the water quality management zone, and I told the committee that I would be okay if we went with manure stack greater than 175 cubic yards. As long as we still have the requirement, if drainage from that manure stack is making it to a surface water body, that, something needs to be done, which is in the code. So that should be covered. The other thing I suggested, will someone help me?
Spreading one time per year. I got it, instead of twice per year.
Yeah, spreading once per year, I think would help the small farmer a little bit, or even the family or the subsistence farmer, hobby farmer, would be more consistent with the way a lot of those people operate.
Got it. Thanks, Tom.
Bob, can I verify something that Tom said?
Sure.
Tom, what county board meeting did the full county board say to enact a manure or CAFCO ordinance? What meeting was that? Because
I think
I
it was
don't
March.
recall that.
Bob,
meeting.
there's actually 3 resolutions.
Okay,
I'm not sure if they all passed
and they're going
unanimously.
to say that they must develop a CAFCO manure ordinance? Or did they say check into it?
It says adequate time to study, review. consider,
I'd rather read it
determine.
myself too.
Pardon me?
Does he have a copy of that here?
We're getting there. We're getting there. Take your time.
I can read it while you guys are talking.
Okay.
I don't think it says you're required to.
Well, you insinuated it in your speech. You've also said at the public hearing, it won't affect small farmers, which is a ridiculous.
I'm not gonna debate what he said.
I know.
Okay.
Hang on a second.
I didn't say that, Scott.
That's what you intended.
Well, we're not, we don't debate it.
Okay.
I think I just admitted that it does have impacts on small farmers. I don't want to debate, like you said. And I suggested ways that could be.
Public comment is public comment. You make your comments and we consider your comments.
All right.
We're not gonna have back and forth.
Right. I'll be fine.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else here that wants to comment today? Anybody on Zoom that would like to comment?
Okay, for committee members, Bob, or is this, we'll get our turn?
Comment if you want to. We're gonna have an opportunity, John, for you
I'll wait.
to talk in just a few minutes
Got it.
about your feelings on the comments that were received, and also what the purpose of this ordinance is in your mind.
Ready when you are.
Okay. So that's it for public comments today. Thank you. All right, we're going to discuss now the proposed ordinance. I'm going to start with you, John, and this is what I'm going to ask. I want you to tell the committee in your mind, you know, we've been worked on this for a year or more. What you see the purpose of the ordinance, what is and was, and your feelings regarding public comment received. And you can start, John, and we'll go to Mike and Jim. Mr. Tony, and Mitch, I don't think is with us yet. You can't tell, can't see.
Mitch,
are you
Mitch,
there?
are you there?
I guess not, and then I'll give mine. So John, go right ahead.
I do not see Mitch on yet, sorry.
My understanding from the purpose originally was, just as we heard, it was a follow-up to the moratorium on the CAFO, which I guess I did not realize that. One of the more insightful things that was sent as prep for this meeting was the PowerPoint presentation, which showed different approaches to, I'll say, addressing a CAFO. I still think that's the objective. And I know there's been a lot of effort to have minimal impact on the types of farmers that we have in Oneida County, none of which are CAFOs, not even close to CAFO, right? When I read the definition of a true CAFO. And it's not really numbers of animals, it's how much manure is generated, right? You could have 1,000 chickens and never come close to what 500 cows would generate. So I hope that answers the first question, at least in my mind, what the purpose is. One of the things that I got out of the PowerPoint presentation is that there's more than one approach to addressing CAFOs. In my opinion, this is not the right approach by doing a manure storage ordinance. And when the time is right, Bob, I'd like to propose to make a motion to discontinue further work in this committee on a CAFO manure storage or on a manure storage ordinance for Oneida County. As far as public comment, you heard not one farmer that was in favor of a manure storage ordinance, all of which are relatively small farmers, at least by our state standards. Maybe the reason why we don't have a manure storage ordinance today in Oneida County. And the folks in favor overwhelmingly represent some type of lake association. And so those are the two sides of this equation from what I gathered. That's all I have, Bob. Any questions?
Any questions for John or follow-ups to what John said? Okay, very good. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Mike,
Yeah, when we first started this, I listened, I questioned why we were using Fond du Lac County's template. I worked down in Fond du Lac, they have a lot of farms down there. I worked in Sheboygan, and I thought it was odd that we were using a template for somewhere such as that, where there's a lot of farms. I lived up here for about 25 years. I just don't see many farms. I drive the county a lot. So that seemed odd to me, and I remember raising that question and thought it was a good idea, you know, and Bob and both Bobs on the committee are like me. They like clean water, clean air. And I listened to that and I thought, you know what, it's not the end of the world to have an ordinance that's going to kick in before the state. Maybe be more restrictive. We got to protect this. We also don't have farms, but we got more lakes than anywhere else in the country or in the Midwest. We've got lakes everywhere. I got 60 some probably in a 10-mile radius. So it made sense to me. And then I started looking into it. When we had our informational meeting, I already had formed my opinion then that we probably don't need this. When you start getting small farmers calling you, saying this is going to affect my farming operation, you have to stop and look and say, do you have a problem? Have we ever had a problem with manure runoff, waste runoff, waste infiltration? I haven't heard of any in this county. And I do like clean water, clean air. I worked for the highway department for over 30 years. The chemicals we put on our highway that run right down into the water is a hell of a lot worse than what we see a catastrophe here. It just isn't. I could eat a cow cake. It's grass ground up and enzymes. I'm an engineer. I took a lot of chemistry. I did leachate studies. I think that this is cow poop, chicken poop is a little more toxic. And animal units based on 100 pounds. I get it. An example given to me by a person who manages farms throughout the world, lives in our state, probably knows more than everybody about this. And he gave me an example, Bob. He said, hey, without an ordinance, you could have a guy come in like me with 100 head of cattle, 140 head of ewes. Take my backhoe and dig a hole in the ground and bury all the poop in there. Don't cover it, it rains on it. You know what that's gonna do, Mike? It's gonna infiltrate. He got into all the things that have happened that sounds really bad. And he said the cleanup is gonna be expensive. Just like a gas station, when you at DOT, you buy a gas station, you gotta clean it up. Who the hell can afford that? He said it'll be on the farmer. Now they have cost shares and all this, but it's gonna be on the farmer. If we had that happen, could I call somebody for help like the DNR? I can't take my engine oil and dump it on the ground. Yep, you're right. You would get help. You're darn right you would if you get complained. So we don't have any farmers digging holes, burying 140 cattle poop in the ground. And if we did, big deal. That's what I'm learning. Okay, I think we're making something where we don't have a problem. We've never had a problem. And if we did see something, we could complain about it. The whole idea of, oh, well, we're trying to prevent that from happening. We don't have the staff. You look at Marathon County, they have 6 or 9 people managing their ordinance. We wouldn't be able to do that. It sounded really good. And I appreciate going through all this because we do have a lot of lakes here. It made sense to do something like this. But just because you push it through doesn't mean you have to stick with it. At a point, you look at it, you say, are we really adding more policy, more government that we can't manage? We've never had a problem in this county. And if we did, we could stop it. And I'll go back to that silly example I said. 100% of the people, maybe 99.9% want clean air, clean water. When the gentleman's club came into my town, it wasn't 100%. But there was a lot of people that were calling me saying, hey, how do we stop it? I said, we don't have an ordinance to stop it. And there was people on both sides. In this case, we don't have an ordinance to stop that example John gave me. 140 cows pooping in a hole, putting it in a hole. But you know what? We would be able to stop it because 100% of the people want this. And if we had a problem and a complaint, we would have help. So that was what he said. He said, if you're going to gamble, you're going to say you're never going to have a problem and you don't now. And I'm willing to do that with this ordinance because I already know we're polluting other places that are worse than this. I don't think we need to do this. I'm glad we went through it. It made sense, but I definitely don't think we need it.
Any questions for, are you done, Mike?
Yep.
Any questions for Mike? Yeah, thank you, Mike. Jim,
This is Nick.
John, question?
No, Mitch.
Mitch came on?
Yeah, I just want to let you know that I came on. I got on late, so.
Can you hear us okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no questions for Mike. Bob, thank you.
All right. We'll go on to Jim.
When we started looking at this ordinance, I was thinking back of an issue I had down in, when I was in 4-H youth development educator down in Greene County, Wisconsin. We had a neighboring county that had but it was a CAFO type issue. And it was a spill. They had a unit placed for liquid manure. It was compromised. It leaked, ran down a hill, went into a trout stream and killed lots of trout. And I kept thinking, okay, we certainly would not want to see that up in Oneida County. So I thought, well, maybe that would be a good idea to have some sort of regulations in place. So I was in favor of looking at some sort of manure storage ordinance. I listened to the comments, but well, before we got even to the public comments from the committee, I started doing a little bit of research because we were doing stuff and we were having these committee meetings. And I was going into DAT regulations, and I was going into DNR regulations. And a little side point, DAT regulations are like reading the Bible. When I read the Bible, there's all these little subpoints. And the regulations are full of subpoints where they say, okay, you need to relate to this number and you go over to here. And you relate to this number and you go over to here. Talk about getting lost real quick. Didn't take me long to get lost in DATCAP and DNR regulations because they were citing other laws and stats, and it got really confusing. And I'm not a lawyer like Mike is. You can read this stuff and think it's elementary and understand it. I don't. I have trouble with that. I can read the Bible and understand it with some help. That's what I have a pastor for. But so I was starting to have some questions and thinking, well, maybe not. Then we had our public hearing, and I started hearing our farm families that live in Oneida County. And then when I heard that, Stephanie said, Michelle said, we identified 270 ag letters to send out. We know not all of those are animal farms. We know some of those are horses, it's whatever, yeah.
Row crop.
Be row crops, cranberries, it could be
Maybe not
anything.
even operating.
Anything operating. But when I started hearing from, after the hearing that we had, I took this to our town board meeting in Newbold. And I said, have you heard about the manure storage ordinance? Yeah, most of them had heard about it. They either read about it in the paper, or they heard about it on radio, or they had talked to somebody that they knew, and some of them have animals. And so I was asking them, okay, what do you think about this? I did not get one single person who said they were in favor of this manure storage ordinance. Now, I represent South Newbold. Mike represents North Newbold. 100% are not in favor of this ordinance. I listen to my people, so I've gotten to a point. I know the trout stream down in Lafayette County we need to avoid, but I think there are ordinances and statutes in place that will kind of address this. So I guess I kind of lean more, you're leaning, Mike, in the sense that I don't think we need this ordinance, especially from the people I represent in Google. Now, one of them are in favor, and I had people who pigs, I mean, not many. And they, each of them told me that night at the Google meeting, we want good, clean water too. We're not going to allow our animals to be messing in our water. We don't want that in our wells. We're going to take the necessary precautions to manage our small amounts of manure. And some of the larger folks said, who have horses and cattle. And one person told me, when we talked about 175 cubic feet as being a manure spreader, so we get one of those a day. And in the middle of winter, we have to stack until we can get it on the fields. And if we have a wet spring, we're not going to get it to the fields in 180 days necessarily. So, and I like what Tom said when he said, well, we may want to change that. That would be good if we were going to do something. We'd want to certainly do that. But I guess I'm to the point where I'm saying I don't think this is necessary. We got bigger fish to fry, such as salt and I agree with that because I used to teach snowmobile safety for a DNR. That was something we always told kids, don't go running underneath bridges because of water the ice there is going to be not conforming, it's gonna be, porous and you might break through. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of where we're at.
And I think I missed the first part about why you originally thought the ordinance 5, we were working on it.
Well, I was thinking back about that trout stream down in Lafayette County that was compromised, but it was a CAFO. And, and I did go and read, and that's what I was looking for, because we have, as was alluded to earlier, we have many, many more lakes than most counties in the state, except for Riders County. Between the two counties, we got 25.
So they say.
Pardon?
They say they've got more.
Okay, I'm not gonna argue with Vilas County on that.
That's why I said.
Bob, can I ask a question to Jim?
Sure.
Jim, do you think we'd be further ahead with some type of outreach program through Conservation Committee as opposed to an ordinance? Meaning, now one of the positives is that we have visibility of who our farmers are, right?
Yeah, we do have visibility with who some of our farmers are, right? We may not have them all, but I know, of the ones that I talked to in Newbold, and I know of some out toward Lakewood. And then now we got, Barry and Cindy here, and they have, 1 or 2 cows. They're not that many, but, we all have.
I think-
Yeah, maybe outreach, that might be a good way to approach this.
Michelle and I talked, is that John talking?
That was John.
Yes,
Michelle and I have talked about that quite a bit. Even if this thing doesn't go through, we're gonna do an outreach for sure.
great. Thank you.
So that's in the front. Yep. Thank you for the idea, John.
And one other thing I would say from Newbold Town Committee meeting, they had 3 people that had animals at that meeting who said, if we would have the conservation department have some sort of a, I don't know what you want to call it, a town meeting or a countywide meeting, just to come in and listen and hear what our updated practices and stuff, so they can learn, because they will always continue to grow and learn. So
That's outstanding. I think that's absolutely what we're considering. Those current practices, how do you work if you only have a few animals? What's the best practice? Sure. That's great. I'm glad you said that.
yeah, because to me, I thought, oh, that makes a lot of sense, because they're trying to, in whatever size they are, whether they're small or medium, they're looking for ways to improve. And, we have a roundtable discussion with a bunch of farmers in the room. And they say, oh, that's a good idea. I think I could apply that to my farm.
The farmers of the future also, a lot of them didn't grow up on a farm, and so they might not know or be aware of best practices. Not to discredit anybody, but I run into a lot of young people that come and buy grain, and they're buying a goat or a sheep for the first time, or they get a horse, right? And they may not know what a good practice looks like, and they're looking for that kind of help. Most of them look online, but I think that outreach could be quite beneficial in some cases. At least
Very good. Thank you,
towards
John.
two
Let's move
ends.
on. Are you done, John?
I'm done.
Bob told me.
Okay, your first question was, why did we create the MSO?
Yep.
This dates back to, I think, 2016. There was a moratorium in place. I sent this all around. It's been, at that time, if you read through this, the purpose was, the moratorium was created to provide additional time to study, review, consider, and determine whether amendments to Oneida County's shoreline protection ordinance, creation of a livestock facility zoning ordinance, or creation of manure storage ordinance is required to protect health and safety in Oneida County. I think this goes back that far. I think back then, this comes from the first resolution, which was Resolution 2020, Ordinance Amendment number 1, 2020. At that time, Carl stated that the committee is looking at what zoning districts commercial ag is allowed and a manure storage ordinance is being drafted. So I think this goes back to that. We've had two resolutions to extend the moratorium. The last one was a resolution 79, 2021, which is scheduled to run out on March 1st of 2022. So I think that basically is why we were looking at that, because the moratorium was in place. If you read the proposed ordinance and you look on chapter 28-2, it specifically spells out what the purpose of the ordinance is. And to sum it up a bit, this does not, we're looking at manure storage facilities. We're looking at manure storage facilities. All right, so I think that's the second part of my answer to your question. The other reason personally I look at this is and I think everybody got this, right? Everybody got the map. Everybody got the map. There's 61 counties in Wisconsin that have a manure storage ordinance. None of them have as many lakes and rivers as we do, other than maybe Vilas County. There's 6 counties around us, 5 of them around us, that don't have one. And they don't have one because they don't think they're gonna need one. I go, and I said this before, I go to the ostrich effect. You said we don't have a problem. I absolutely 100%. How about you? Yeah, I mean, Scott asked Carl last meeting, how many complaints have you got? You probably got none in whatever. You basically, you've got none. You've got none. So I don't believe this ordinance applies to, this is my feeling, and this is how, when we went through this and how the people that were working on this went through and developed it, they weren't looking at the small guy, the United County farmer. We're looking at the big guys. And I think if you read through the ordinance, it's dealing with, farms of 500 animals or more. And so I don't think 61 other counties have done this just because they didn't need it to start with. Bayfield County, I think Mike used Fond du Lac as our example. We also used Bayfield County, I think, in part of the drafting of the manure storage. So it wasn't just one, they used several different references. So I look at that and I go, personally, I like local control. I don't like relying on the state or DAC to come in and be, Tom's, you said it was reactive, right? The DNR is going to be reactive. We can be proactive, but I think this is targeted at the larger, over 500 animal units. There's actually 3 ways to control this. Preventing, not even preventing CAFOs. We can regulate CAFOs. You can do it locally. You can do it with a manure storage ordinance, which 61 other counties say it's a good idea. You can do it with a comprehensive countywide or town-wide ordinance through licensing or permitting. Again, Bayfield County did that. Countywide zoning districting. This is what Carl talked about back in 2020. He was talking about commercial ag districts. Where are we going to have a permitted use of CAFO? So that's why I think we did this. As far as what did I hear at the meeting, I heard 7 or 8 people talked in favor of it. 7 or 8 people talked against it. My question was, what I wanted to hear the answer to is when people were speaking against this, operationally, practically, or financially, all 3 of those If someone is affected, if one of our small farmers in Oneida County is affected by this, how is that operationally, practically, and financially going to affect their operation? I didn't hear one person say anything about that. I didn't hear one person say, the reason I don't like this is because my manure pile is on the edge of a river. I didn't hear that. And frankly, if they have a manure stack on the edge of a river, they're already out of compliance. Because they're not allowed to do that as it is. So I'm sure there's going to be an outlier, I'll call it an outlier out there, where we have a farm that's a small amount of acreage. They have 5 horses, and whether 5 horses is the right number for the amount of acres, right? The zoning has a certain number of acres per unit, per animal, right, in different zoning districts. There's going to be an outlier or 2 out there, but I think 95% of the farmers in Oneida County are going to be unaffected operationally, practically, and financially. This is going to go into effect, and people are going, oh, we got this people or the manure storage ordinance. It's not going to change the way they do business on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday next week. It's not. Nobody said that. Nobody spoke to that. So I'm sorry, that's my long answer. That's what I got.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Tomey?
I have 2 questions, Bob, for Bob.
I just go on 1 second. Jim's going right now. You'll be next.
Sure.
I noticed back in the ordinance resolution from 2020 and 2021, it said a minimum of 500 cows or 500 livestock. But in the current resolution that we have, I don't see that 500 number.
That's because the resolution
Ordinance.
The ordinance.
The ordinance is not a unit, it's about manure storage facilities. It's not about units. And I personally like the idea of having a unit minimum, but if the corporate council or the DAC or the PNR says we can't do that, then we can't do that. I mean, I'm totally 100% in favor of that. But if it's not gonna pass, if it's not gonna pass the litmus test from the DNR or DAC, it doesn't matter what we want to do.
John?
Yeah, if you were a farmer and thought that you were potentially in violation of the ordinance, do you think you would volunteer that at a public listening session? Probably not.
Oh,
And then the second thing is, I think we all have a lot of confidence in Carl and his committee. I always say this in a contract, it's the asshole after him that I don't have confidence in. And so how tough, right? Or how we want to enforce it, or someone after down the line wants to enforce it. That's the unknown, I think, that makes it tough for farmers to say, how exactly will it impact me, right? Until we see how the enforcement might be done.
Okay, anything else, John?
No, sir.
Okay.
Bob, can I make a comment to follow up on Bob Tomey's comments?
Sure.
Okay, so Bob, you brought up the resolutions from the county board. All 3 of those are moratorium resolutions.
Right.
Nothing about it. But when you read the document from 2020, you left off the part that says the United County Board of Supervisors hereby imposes a moratorium on the licensing of new livestock facilities that will have 500 or more animal units, and on the licensing of pre-existing livestock facilities that are undergoing an expansion of the number of animal units kept at the expanded facility will be 500 or more, provided that the moratorium does not apply to an applicant who has acquired legally vested rights to the issuance of a license prior to the adoption of this ordinance. But so when Tom gets up and says the county board instructed you guys and you've got to do a report, that's a false statement again. He did not. The county board said a moratorium, and he also instructed the P&Z department to handle this, which we did, and came back and said We are not moving forward, and you guys got that report on March 9th, 2020. 2000, yeah, March 9th, 2020, at your meeting, and it was explained. 9 months later, it took you guys before a couple guys decided, because Bob told me, brought it back to your meeting and said, we gotta move on this. It's in the minutes from the Land and Water. And Tom Giroux and Dan Butkus were already working on it for your committee. Nowhere in the record does it say in those 9 months that somebody made a motion to move forward on it and get this group, 2 people, to write an ordinance for your committee and bring it to you. So Carl, the moratorium you brought to us, we had said no, we wouldn't have continued it. You brought it to us and said,
You're gonna comments to Bob, you said.
okay, all right.
Right.
Okay, those are Bob's comments. All right, I'll get back later.
Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, Bob told me his comments, he's great at digging stuff up. I really appreciate him being on the board because he does a good job of that. And I see where he's coming from. However, that's a great question, Bob. I thought the same thing as I listened to these people. What exactly is going to be affected? John Engel says, well, they're not going to expose it to us. Well, when I talked to this person that consults farms all over the different states, he said, first of all, I learned a lot. I work with a lot of laws every day. So this NRCS, they're the keeper of the standards. They don't enforce it. The states pick it up and make it more restrictive if they want. That's where Jim's having a problem going back to all these different codes. And what we see is when we have these things, he was talking about small farmers could be impacted up to $30,000 on average sometimes. What? Holy man, this is a big deal. Now, Bob says, how come they didn't come out and tell us that? I don't know. I was wondering the same thing. They just said they didn't like it. They didn't want to get into the details. Here's what I'll say to you, Bob, though. When I deal with safety of intersections and bridges, if we make the wrong decision and we don't put a policy in there, people die. A lot of people die. This is cow poop, chicken poop. It goes in our groundwater. I don't like it. You don't like it. The neighbor down the hill's got a shallow well and he gets E. coli in his well. I don't want that. What I'm saying is we can put policies for everything in our laws that are good things. You have to make a decision to say, where's too much government? Why are we doing this if we don't have a problem? Because 60 other counties of the 72 have it? That would be a bad answer, and I know you'd agree. You don't do it just because they have it. It's a good idea to put your feelers on and say, why do all these other people have it? Maybe I'd argue that we have more lakes, so we have less farms. I don't know, that makes sense to me, but I don't know that. So I think it's good to look at that all these other counties have it, but that's not the reason to put an ordinance in just because other people have it. It's a good idea to look at it. What I want to do is look at it. We don't have a problem now. A 500 unit farm is 357 mature cows. We have maybe 20, 30 cows. I think some of them go up to 50. So we're protecting ourselves by talking and having these discussions of some guy coming with 150 or 250 cows. The state would kick in. That ought to beg my brain to say, why doesn't the state, if it's that important, it's so dangerous, why wouldn't they have something a little more? They wait until you have 357 cows before they kick in. Only having these small cow or chickens, animal units, must not be that important, or the state would kick in. I also like county control more than state control, because I deal with a lot of state laws. And so I think we have to look at the severity of the situation. If we didn't have this, how many people are gonna die? Not many. We don't even have that many people here. I don't want anybody to die. But we can look at all the things in life and say, let's put a policy here, put a policy there, because she might get sick or he might get sick. We got to be careful we don't need this right now. Okay, so we're protecting for somebody coming in, and we do have a way to call somebody if something starts to happen. And I 100% think Michelle should be in her PD, in her position description to be, so she has to outreach with these farmers and know exactly what, farmers talk to each other, whether John Engel's a crop farmer, he's talking to other farmers who are pig farmers. And you know it and I know it, that's what they do. And so if she's out talking with them, she'll hear stuff and that's what the county's for, more. This isn't a terrible ordinance if it passes, it's just not needed.
Anything else, Mike?
No.
Anyone else have comment? Okay.
I do have one comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just one.
Mitch?
Okay, yeah, Mitch, go ahead.
Yeah, my opinion on this is that we don't need this. You know, I represent Cashion, Woodboro, and Crescent, and we have quite a few farmers, you know, cattle people, and every single one of them doesn't want this, and we're elected to do the best things for our constituents, and that's why I'm a no go on this at all. That's all I'm going to say about it. Nobody wants it. None of my people want it, so I'm not going to vote for it. It got way out of hand. I thought it was just for facilities coming in that we're going to, you know, a business that stores manure. That's what originally I thought this was all about, but I didn't think it was going to affect the guy that had 1 or 2 cows or, you know, a half a dozen horses. And that's all.
Jim.
I saw I went back and started reading through that gap. I forgot which number I was on. It was talking about farms that are grandfathered in before 1997. And I don't know if somebody can tell me more about that than I understood, but so if a farm has been in place for 50 years or 100 years prior to 1997, they're grandfathered in from certain rules and regulations. How does that work?
Mr. Attorney.
I don't know what section of the code he's referring to.
Yeah, and
I mean,
I have it here somewhere. I believe.
I would have to read that to be.
If you just talk generally about grandfathering.
Well, I mean, the state
You'd
can,
love to
the state
grandfather.
can do that. I mean, I'm not sure your question is the question, what does the,
I've heard a lot of instances where people are grandfathered in. I don't know if that's too broad a statement for you to comment on or not.
there are many instances where due to someone's operation or existence, a new law or regulation would not apply to them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's
I could comment.
92.15 under 92.17. And it talks about local regulations of livestock operations. And the definition of livestock operation means a feedlot or other facility or pasture where animals are fed, confined, maintained, or stabled. And it goes on down through this, and it said something about October 14th, 1997, any livestock operation that exists on October 14th, 1997, and then is required get a permit 283.31, and then starts getting into the sub 59.6. I mean, it goes into 59.69, 60.61, 60.62, 61.35, or 62.23, and it gets into all these sub. That's where I started getting lost, because then I started going, okay, now what does that one say? So I go into. I wish I had my computer here to read you through these.
And your question, Jim?
And my question is, so if you had your farm before 1997, you were excluded from this?
Is this a statute or administrative code? Because I
don't know.
I have to read it before I know.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Just a question that
It
came up.
sounds like a rule, an administrative code, but here's what I'll say about this for the.
I
Oh,
had
okay,
Scott
sorry,
next
sorry.
and then Mike.
My experience, 30 years on the town board, in 1997, the state took and drew a line in the sand and said, liquor licenses, any liquor license that you have today, you're allowed to move forward with. You're allowed to get rid of them after 1997, but you are not to add any more unless you have a 500 people growth. They did this on a number, like abroad across the state. So they wrote that into each item. I believe that's what happened. So like
So it
every
has
town,
happened at least with liquor
Well,
license.
I have to go back, if I want to issue another license, I have to go back to 1997, see what was on the books. I believe that's why you're got the livestock thing. I think they drew a line in the sand.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I was gonna say, in my line of work, what we do with this grandfathering thing, we look at it as critical thinkers and say, is this something that's super dangerous that we can even grandfather? If she's doing something that we know is gonna kill somebody, pretty high number percentage, we don't grandfather that. So even if you have grandfathered something and something comes up later, but there's rules that come into place real quick to take that out because we know that. So it goes back to, I wanted to comment with what Mitch said, is that I have no further comments. All the farmers said they don't want it, and I'm here to do what my constituents say. Well, I agree with that to a certain extent, because I deal with pretty complex stuff that people drive cars, have to follow the rules that I'm putting in place and the policies they don't understand them. They're not engineers. And so they might say, I hate that rule. All of your constituents say they don't want it. But if we had enough outreach and I could explain why we're doing this, they would see it. Case in point, putting manure, it was a little more than manure. It was from a tertiary plant where people are. It comes out of the plant of a city that had a lot of old people in it. It was Cheyenne, Wyoming. And they have heavy metals in their stools. These trucks can't take this manure or this waste down any length of the highway, because if it got in an accident, it's very, very dangerous if this stuff went all over people around it. So the only place they could spread it, it's a mountainous area, was on Bob Motz's farm, let's say. It was a real story. It happened. And
I'm checked off about that.
and this guy has a white picket fence around his farm. He's a millionaire. He's a rich guy. Everybody knows him. And he's got it on the edge of Cheyenne. And the engineer I was talking to, he says, yeah, I know right where we could spread this stuff. Because we were having a problem. You can't drive it very far because of these tankers. If they tip over, it's very dangerous. We'll go there. I said, well, yeah, I thought he's kidding. Well, he went and sat down and had coffee with them. And by the time he got his informed consent, he told them this is the only place that makes sense for the whole community. That's what we did. What I'm getting at to Mitch is, if you can explain and outreach why we're doing something, and then they might not say, hey, I don't want it. Once they see it, they might say, yeah. So keep that thought in mind. We did that. We went through this. I talked to experts. And it doesn't add up that we need this right now. There's not a bunch of people gonna die if a shallow well gets E. coli in it. That would be the worst case scenario. We would know this is happening. We'd be able to stop it. That's why I'm against this, because it's just, we don't need it. And if we see a problem, we can stop it then. We can go back to the drawing table.
Okay, thank you, Mike. My turn. First of all, I'm going to comment on Mitch. I'm not sure, Mitch, if you said you talked to all the farmers affected or all that you spoke with are against it. That's two different things.
That was with the emails and the people that I've talked to, not everyone, but the people that I've talked to.
Okay, thank you. Start with the image I have in my eye is very much like Jim has in his eye of the trout stream and the kill in Lafayette County. Is that correct? I came from Ohio. My grandpa had a 90-acre farm, crop farmer, hunted pheasants there, ran out of trap muskrats in the ditch, whole deal. Now, farm is being farmed, but not grandpa, he's long passed away. But a mile down the road, some Dutch came in with a mega farm of cows. And there's a lot of manure produced daily by that mega farm. One of the ways to get rid of it is they pipe it. There's a section of land across my grandpa's farm, and they've allowed them to spread the manure on there, but they pipe it to it. And those pipes leak, and the ditches where I trap muskrats are now full of grass and full of stuff that's not very pleasant to see, and the smell is bad and so on. Bad way to get it there. If they tanked it, you would have spills anyhow, whatever. But that's what stands out in my mind, and I don't think we want that for any of our streams or lakes in Oneida County. That's my mental picture. When this, I'm gonna just go through the questions I asked. Why do we have the ordinance in place? I think to address large operations, including CAFOs, and having something in place for local permitting and oversight if those came in. It was not the guy that has 4 horses, 3 cows, whatever. Those people, I'm gonna believe John Sweeney when he says, and gentlemen today talked about how they observe good practices. They don't want to pollute the lakes any more than anybody else does. So in my mind, that's why we did it, because you can't put it in place after the large operations come in. Is that correct? It can't be after the fact.
Can't go retroactive.
Can't go retroactive, right?
Anything related to zoning.
Okay.
Bob, can I just say though, if they came in, they fall under the state law.
If they're
Yes.
500 or more.
Yeah,
Right.
that's, yeah,
That's
300,
right.
357 cows. That's what that is. The animal unit's 1,000 pounds. So you'd have 357 mature, then the heifers, you'd have more heifers, but that's what that really is.
Okay. I was concerned about a threat to Oneida County waters, especially lakes and rivers that drive the tourist industry. You know, when we have our budget hearings, we listen to tourism people, and they said the impact on Oneida County in 2017 was $240 million, something like that. And obviously, if a lake gets polluted, you're not gonna lose all of it. But I don't want to be on a lake that is greening up, has excess phosphorus and so on, if it happens. But they don't come up here for dirty lakes. We had a lot of people come up. We've broken the sales tax revenue for 2 or 3 years in a row because people are escaping COVID and coming up here because we've got what they want, you know, and we want to protect that. The Planning and Zoning Committee elected not to pursue the CAFO ordinance. And I am still trying to get clear in my mind when it was told, because I know it was told, and I thought it might be Carl, I'm not sure, that the Land and Water Committee, in its purview, can take up a manure storage ordinance as a way to address large operations. And I can remember it happening, I just cannot remember the date or the person. Since Planning and Zoning did not want to deal with that, we decided to do it. Our committee brought it up. And that's why we're doing today, and what's taken a year to do. The line in the 2020 resolution that was passed at county board says, determine whether amendments to the Oneida County zoning and shoreline protection ordinance, creation of a livestock facilities zoning ordinance, or creation of a manure storage ordinance is required to protect public health or safety in Oneida County. So it's one of the ways that can be addressed. Mr. Tomey mentioned there are 3 ways to do it. And certainly, this way is not the best way, and we can pursue the other 2 ways. It's a way to do it. I have another idea that I'll bring up later, but not at this moment. So we took up the challenge to do that. The committee accepted the offer to research and compile from other counties, as was pointed out. There's 62 that have manure storage ordinances. And Mr. Giroux was a former DNR employee, Mr. Butkus is a property owner on Squash Lake and a member of Wisconsin Lakes Association Board of Directors. Really well versed in law concerning lakes and so on. We asked them to look into it. I know that both of them spent a great deal of time along with Michelle and Carl in researching this particular ordinance. My response to the comments that we heard, first, there was much concern from small livestock operators, many of who seem to be echoing the comments made by Mr. Sweeney. Some of them brought up the right to farm law, which is a good law. I think there is one situation that was quoted in there about a cranberry farmer someplace that was discharging into the waters, and that was taken to court and was law and litigation. Eventually, I think the governor said, we've had enough of it. That's, we'll just settle it the way it is. But I'll address that in just a little bit. It's not the intent to overburden small livestock farmers at all. Not the intent. When we started this, I was not worried about the guy that had 5 cows. I'm still not worried about it. Because for the most part, either they're outside that water management area, so it doesn't really affect them, and it's not going to affect the lake. Or the restrictions are not that great. But again, I'll address that later. I had Michelle contact Mr. Sweeney to ask him how his farm operations be negatively affected. Here is the question. I asked if he could submit a written statement as to how the farming operation be negatively affected by the proposed manure storage ordinance. This was January 14th. I'd like him to give us that information. We could present it at today's meeting, because he by far offered more comments and more support and more paperwork and more research than anybody else by far. I mean, tremendous. I give him great credit for doing what he did. His response: greetings, Bob, Carl, and Michelle. I was in receipt of this January 14th email and was considering the response. Yesterday, I was provided with a copy of a 2-page letter from your Land and Water Conservation Department, quote, advisor Dan Butkus. I do not intend to participate in an information gathering process that would then disparage, intimidate, or harass individuals who would choose to offer their information to elected officials. We continue to make our home on the land that we farm and cherish and respect our animals, land, and water. And I would hope every farmer does that. Respectfully, John Scarlett Sweeney. Well, that's up to John, whether he offers comments or not. And I am assuming that he was upset, and I know John Engel was upset about a public comment given by Mr. Butkus. For some reason, our Zoom at the last con meeting dropped off right when he was giving comments. So he wrote a written comment that was pretty, how am I going to say it? I don't want to say damning. It wasn't very positive about the way the committee's handling things.
Evening.
So I'll let that go to that point, and I'm assuming that's why Mr. Sweeney refused and denied. I wish he would have told us, because we need specific information about why this is going to hurt the small farmer. We've had people say economically we're going to lose our farm. We won't be able to do this, blah, blah, blah. I find that difficult to believe looking at the regulations in here. Essentially said, you have 175 cubic feet of manure, please cover it so it doesn't run off into the streams or lakes if you're in that water management area. Keep it 250 feet away from your well. These are some things that we added. Probably, I'm just guessing, correct anybody online or you correct me if I'm wrong, that it's probably already being done. You know, you're stacking outside there, your stacks are spread after 180 days, whatever. But I just listened to comments and we couldn't get Mr. Sweeney to comment specifically. So that is what it is.
Yeah, man, here's
Go ahead.
something here. I took 6 phone calls from people regarding this manure MSO. And 2 of them, and these were all small farm families in the county. And 2 of them read this ordinance to say, and maybe Tom, you can help clarify this. Manure stack ordinance, less than 175 cubic feet, which I've seen in the ordinances, I mean, in the state statutes. But they were led to believe that, and they said that's approximately a
Spreader.
manure spreader size of thing. And they said, well, you know, we get a stack like that a day in some of their small little farms. And that's all we can have before we have to start spreading. And I said, no, I don't think that's the intent.
No.
But the way they read this, they thought that was the intent of this. And I said, no, I don't think it is. But let me check because I didn't know how to take that. So
Tom, you might want to comment on that.
So you can stack manure. It's a perfectly acceptable practice for managing manure, and you can stack more than 175. If you're in the water quality management zone, you need to talk to Michelle and you need to get a permit, unless you cover it. We put that covering in there specifically to allow the small farmer who maybe didn't have area outside of water quality management zone to put his manure, so he'd be able to take care of it. All it has to be is covered,
Puts it in the zone, you have to cover it.
or get a permit. Michelle?
Yep, and I'll add on just a bit of that, and I talked with you about this a bit earlier, the 175 cubic foot, that amount is state statute, that is
yeah,
an
right. I saw it.
undefined, unconfined.
Yeah.
So it's not covered, so if they're within, if we don't even have this manure storage ordinance affected, what the state says right now is if you are within a water quality management zone, meaning within 1,000 feet of a lake or within 300 feet of a river, if you have something bigger than 175 cubic feet and it's not covered, it's illegal. So the 175 isn't something that we made up. We are just mimicking state law.
That's existing.
So as Tom is totally correct, what we wanted to do was, we didn't want it, we're like, okay, well, if they stack and if they cover something that's over 175, no harm, no foul. We wanted to give that option to the small farmer. They can get closer to the waterways, stack closer to the waterways. So we were trying to, that was put in from conversations with small farmers and with Mr. Engel.
All right, so an example, let's say this room was a 40-acre amount of land, and we have a lake over here a half a mile away. The farmer could come, and this is pretty well flat land, no elevation that would flow down into a lake or a river or stream. So he could have 175 stack right here, and he could have 175 stack right here, and he could have 175 stack right here, and he could have 175, because he can't get out into the field.
If he's further than 1,000 feet away from that lake, he can go over the 175.
You could have a full 40.
He can have a whole bunch of 175s, he can have a whole bunch of bigger than 175s.
Yeah.
It's within that 1,000 foot that the 175 starts to be problematic. And that isn't
That's what
because
I
of,
need to make sure that when I talk to these people again
Right.
next week or the week after.
Yeah.
Comment when you want.
See you back there. I told you to sit at the table.
I'm trying to ambush you from behind.
Keep it a little twitch like this.
Doesn't work, does it?
So, Michelle, to your
Yes, sir.
comment, yeah, they're allowed outside, a 40-acre parcel is 1,320 feet. So what you're telling these guys is, if they got their farm past the 1,000-foot mark, they can do anything they want with the manure. But most of their farms, well, most of the small farms aren't on one edge of their farm, they're usually in the middle or within 1,000 feet. Give you an idea, you keep talking about 175, well, we put septic systems within 50 feet of the high water mark are allowed. 3-bedroom septic system is 675 square feet of area buried, could be possibly 3 feet above the water table of the lake. We allow that, but we're really concerned about the farmers and their manure if they got 200 cubic feet in a pile. I think if you take a feed station within 1,000 feet of the water and you put 10 animals around there, at the end of the day, you probably got 175 cubic feet or more piled up. And what the farmers don't need is somebody coming trespassing on their land to try to measure so they can fine them according to the new ordinance.
So if
You talk
have
about
any-
wells.
If you have any question about manures, that's gonna be the expert on it.
Hey, I was born and raised on a farm. We raised our own pigs, chickens, sheep, everything.
There's
I
no
know
debate
about
on what
farming.
you're saying, but I think there is rules in place about barnyard runoff already.
Correct. There's
Right.
already rules in place to keep. And now, when you say this ordinance is written nothing but to affect small operations, the way I read it. You talk about,
Wait
why
a
is
minute,
it,
Wait a minute, say that again.
this ordinance is written, it directly affects all the small farmers.
But it's not written for small farmers. It may affect them, but it's not written.
You
for-
intended to write it for 500 more, but I can go through line by line and tell you how that's a false. Why do you set a side lot line?
I'm sorry, I'm talking and I should just be listening.
That'd be good. And you can cut me off when I'm ready.
Yeah, yeah.
All right,
exactly.
why is
That's
clean
it.
water safety got a setback from a side lot line or a road? What is the purpose to put that in there? Most farms are small, may not even be 40 acres. You're gonna take 100 feet from this lot line, 100 feet from the road, and 100 feet from here, around the outside of that lot for a setback. How does that affect water? Plus your
Any
1,000
other
feet.
comments?
Okay, and then I want to talk about your wells, 250 feet. But I can have my well next to my drain field, 50 feet away. But on a farm, you want all the manure to be 250 feet away from that well. Where's all the science in this except making rules?
Any other
Okay.
comments?
I'm done
Okay,
for now.
I thought that would be the case. Tom,
Just really quickly, I know you don't want to debate, I'm not gonna debate, but I do want to correct one thing about the animal units.
you know, I'm still not done. But go right ahead.
Really quickly. So the state does not regulate 500 animal units unless there's a problem. So if there's a release or mismanagement of a farm between 500 and 1,000, the county's supposed to take care of it. The state only takes care of those animal units over 1,000. And then if it's between 500 and 1,000, the state can come in if it's causing a problem and require a permit after the fact. Otherwise, most counties do regulate that 500 to 1,000. Most of the dairy counties do regulate that 500 to 1,000 with their own CAFO ordinance. And many of them have a complementary manure storage ordinance to go with the CAFO ordinance. I just wanted to clarify that. The other thing is, when they reduce the amount to 750 cows for 1,000, that's because a dairy cow is fed such a high protein diet that it emits liquid manure. And that's much more problematic to manage. The steers are regulated as an animal unit. So it's one animal unit, a steer, a beef cow is one animal unit. A dairy cow is less because it essentially fed such a rich diet that it's liquid manure that comes out of the cow. So those two facts I just wanted on the table.
Thank you.
Michelle, does that sound right to you?
Yes. There's statements by concerned livestock owners that they would be put out of business or suffer difficult monetarily implementing the punitive restrictions that we have here. But again, we didn't see any proof of that. There's certainly anecdotal statements, but not any written proof. Concerns to be from small producers, that would certainly not be intent. And Scott has brought that up as well. I have discussed this many hours with Michelle, way too many. We're not in full agreement on what I will propose later, but that's the way it is sometimes. Read carefully, unless the newer storage ordinance is an equality, unless the newer stack is in a quality management area, you're not going to be affected. The lot lines and so on that Scott brought up, certainly we can talk about those. A comment about your septic system being 250 feet away. Good practice, and look at a septic system or a mound system, probably is absolutely intended for a few people, not 100 cows or 500 cows or whatever. So I don't think that's a good comparison. Suggestion that this MSO is not legal because of Wisconsin right to farm law. I consulted with a committee that I'm on, State Land and Water Conservation Association. And there's a guy named Kurt Calkins. I contacted the head of the association, Matt Krieger, and bright guy, bright enough to say he didn't have an expertise in this field. And so he referred me to Kurt Calkins. Kurt works with legislative matters for Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association, is on the land and water staff in Columbia County. He gave this answer. Bob and Matt, the article below captures the theme of the law. I've had the question before, and my question was, how does the right to farm law, how is it affected considering pollution or runoff? So he said, I've had that question over the years, sometimes from committee members. The fact that you're seeking to pass an ordinance that you legally have the right to pass is statutory authorization, like chapter 92, you in fact are following the intent of the law basis, which states that farmers need to follow good agricultural practices, which is the case of things that you would implement like waste storage, the runoff in our 151 standards, etc. Those would already be acceptable good ag practices because they are already state law. I would spend time explaining the fact that these rules have already been on the books. You at the county level are just looking to enhance local implementation. A simple example would be manure spreading. If someone filed a suit over the act of manure spreading period, like we just don't want it here, I think that would fall under the nuisance suit. If the county tried to ban manure spreading period, that would also. You can require spreading to be done according to NR 151 and NMP 590, which is what you do in the ordinance. You do require the right to farm statement be included on all new manure storage plans that are created to certified ag zoning districts. To basically state that your neighbor can and will farm, so don't complain about noise, odor, and so on. So if the guy comes in next door and says, boy, this farm stinks. Well, didn't you know that when you moved in next to a farm, which is the way that's how I would say, or this property is a farm, farms have animals, blah, 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 make noise, smell, etc. That's a good sign.
Here's your son.
Yeah,
That's when everybody reads it and walk in the yard.
okay, good. But, and that's what the right farm law says. No frivolous lawsuits about stuff that farms do. And I don't think that this ordinance is in any way trying to say that you can't farm. The thing that we would like to do, and it's important to note, also, this is not a right to pollute law. Right to farm doesn't say right to pollute. It's a right to farm, and by implementing the ag runoff standards on farms, you assure they continue to have the right to farm, that they will minimize pollution, remain in compliance. That's what we're trying to do. Okay, so that's a comment on that. Consult Wisconsin Lakes for a position statement. Kind of like the governing body of lakes in Wisconsin. I got a copy. Give it all the numbers. Let me read that into record. And this is from the executive director of Wisconsin Lakes, January 20th. Regarding the Manure storage ordinances, dear Mr. Modest, request on providing you Wisconsin Lakes position regarding countywide manure storage ordinances. Polluted runoff from agricultural facilities, often leading, though certainly not the sole, cause of water quality issues across Wisconsin. Poor manure management practices can result in large amounts of phosphorus, nitrates, and other pollutants making their way into both surface and groundwater. This in turn can result in lowered surface water quality, algae blooms, which can be toxic to humans and other animals, and even water unsuitable for drinking. I have to stop just for a second and share what John Sweeney told me. He said, hey, we drink that water, same as the cattle do, same as the blah, blah, that's well. And I don't know if y'all seen the movie Erin Brockovich, talked about a plant that was polluting nearby. And so she's sitting around the table with all the attorneys from the plant and then this small law firm that's doing this. And she had glasses of water sitting in front of them. And the name of the facility was the Hinckley facility. And she said, oh, I forgot to mention that water is from the Hinckley facility because they almost had to their lips already. And they went, oh, I don't think I'll drink that. But John assures me that they feel safe drinking their product because they're good agricultural practices. And even water unsuitable for drinking, lower surface water quality has been shown to impact quality of enjoyment of our lakes and rivers, something especially important in areas of the state with robust outdoor tourism sector where water-based recreation feeds the local economy. According to a study done in 2017, 70% of the property tax comes from lakes and lakeshore owners. All right, so it's really important to keep them clean. Condition studies have shown reduced property values in waterfront lots from diminished water quality, which in turn can impact local tax base. Manure storage ordinance is a simple tool most counties in the state use to ensure safe and manure. These ordinances go a long way to protecting water quality while allowing agricultural interests to thrive in these areas. Certainly, they are not the be-all, end-all fix of water quality issues. There are many sources of pollution that impact our waters, but manure storage ordinances allow counties to manage and mitigate particular threat manure creates. In general, Wisconsin lakes support manure storage ordinances at countywide levels, an effective and important tool in protecting surface, ground, and drinking water quality. Sincerely, Mike Ingleson. So that's read into record for that particular purpose. This ordinance has been some indication that we didn't have anybody look at. It's kind of like something we just dreamt up and put out there. Not the case. It has been reviewed by DATCAP, Department of Agricultural Trade, Consumer Protection, and is patterned after MSOs in 62 other counties. DNR also looked at it, made some suggestions that were incorporated into the ordinance before it came to this form. I would suspect that farmers in those counties understand the ordinance and make it work in relation to right to farm. If they didn't, or they said the right to farm negates this MSO or their MSOs, there wouldn't be MSOs in those counties. The point, and sticks, and as soon as I say it, the back of my mind is that we are different. There's no question. We don't have the problem right here that I know of. It's been pointed out, and I think Scott asked Carl that, how many instances have there been enforcement problems or concerns? Essentially none over decades. But we're not looking back, we're looking forward. We're trying to look at something that we have and need to have in place in case large operations come in. That's my take, and you'll see that later. I had Michelle consult with Paul Deagle of Marathon County Conservationists. Again, a different county because they have CAFOs, they have lots of cows. Somebody pointed out, I think Mr. Sweeney, when that had conversation, they probably have more cows on one farm down there than we have in all of United County. Okay, so it's not apples and apples, but there's some questions I wanted them to answer. And I think all of that was shipped to committee. And Michelle wrote a summary of it, so let me go through that. John Sweeney mentioned there's an organization that has the amount of registered cattle in an area, and I didn't know that when we wrote this thing, because that would give us a good idea of all the 270 ag-related letters that we sent out, how many of those actually have livestock. Paul said, yes, this does exist, but it's not public record, so we could not get it. We cannot access that. Second, is there something on the books that determines when a farmer needs a storage facility? For example, so many head of cows or cubic feet of manure. Answer, no. Farmers should be following state standards on manure spreading if they don't have the land capacity to spread or have the spread or half the spread during winter, have no storage. They should be investing in a facility, but nothing is requiring them to build it. It would just be good practice. As Oneida County stands right now, a farmer can build any type of structure to hold manure, and that structure can be located within a water quality management area. If you pass an ordinance, the farmer will need to get a permit, which means the county has oversight of that facility. And I think that, in large part, is the intent of this ordinance. If we establish an ordinance, any new manure facility will need to get a permit. Even one over 500 head of cattle, which is a CAFO designation. DNR will regulate the CAFO, county would regulate anything smaller. But the county will have it permitted, and in Falls County now allows a close working relationship with the DNR. I think it's another step in protection. Question, if you do not pass an ordinance, DNR would regulate 4 prohibitions listed on page 2010. That's in the state statute. This individual sheet was handed out with the split page. Y'all got that. It talks about what laws are in effect right now. This is an educational tool as well. We have to understand, make farmers understand, large or small, that this is in effect right now. Maybe they don't understand that. Paul strongly recommends, okay, land and water could work with farmers and should work with farmers that are breaking law, but county will have no oversight, no regulatory power without this ordinance, although those prohibitions are in effect. Scott has mentioned those as well. Can we put a minimum animal unit on our ordinance? For example, have our ordinance apply only to those farms with over 100 animal units. Paul strongly recommended against this angle. He told me he's been in discussion groups that have expressed the need for regulatory consistently across small and large farms. Hostile policy and issues with small producers. And I talked to John Engel about that too and asked him that question. not John Pingle, I'm sorry, John Sweeney. And he said, yeah, 25 cows, if the manure's improperly handled, can cause a problem. Okay, in my mind, the law in effect on the books right now would handle that, or should handle it. And if there is that happening, then that farmer should be brought to task first by saying, hey, got this problem, this is how it best be handled. And if they absolutely deny it, then I think you go after them. There was one guy I talked to that talked about a farmer. I think I talked to my son, who's a warden, and then I asked him if they ever, he's in West Sheriff County, asked if they ever had a situation like this. He said there's one farmer, had a bunch of cattle, and every spring a road would flood, his lot would flood, where all the manure is, flow across the road into a lake. And he talked to him, gave him these options, is what you need to do, and so on. He said, forget it, took him to court. He was his own attorney in court. And it's often been said, if you're your own attorney, you can have a dummy for a client or something like that. And he lost, and he just continued to do it. They had to shut down the farming operation because he absolutely refused to go along with the practices that would keep that from happening. So it has happened, but it doesn't happen very often. Also, so by limiting our ordinance, we would be allowing the very thing we want to prevent. Lastly, Paul was asked to go over our ordinance by Mr. Sweeney, because Mr. Sweeney evidently worked for a relative of Paul on a farm down there or something. And made mention of those areas he thought exceeded NR 151. Paul also shared those ideas with me. I've highlighted those sections and include some notes. I'm not have time to research and list all these sections in the document for the public hearing. We feel uncomfortable in doing so. And we'll be able to address the setbacks in a document at tomorrow's meeting, those things that I know that are in or out of state statute. And I think that's what this paper, I asked Michelle, what's on state law right now? What's a specific to Oneida County? And it's an interesting document right there. And certainly this side that's specific to Oneida County, we can adjust if needed. All right, so that's Paul's information. Paul, well respected around the state, good guy, easy to talk to, and as I think has his own farming operation, also works closely with farmers in Marathon County. Mr. Tomey gave us this CAFO report, whatever, and is there anything in particular you want to talk about in there? So the title is Water Rich Counties Targets for New CAFOs, and it talks about what a CAFO is, definition, goes on, might reference that as animal units and so on, by size. Get the right page here. It talks about why our county is a heck of a lot different than any other county. 1,129 lakes, 75,000 acres of surface water. 10% of the county is surface water. The Northern Highland Ecological Landscape Study has one of the highest concentrations of freshwater lakes in the world. I think if we put us with Vilas County, we're in the top 4 in the whole world of freshwater lakes. 73% of all residential value in waterfront property, $4.9 billion in this county. Tax revenues, $47 million a year from waterfront properties, and revenue from tourism in 2017, $229 million. I think the latest is up pushing 250 million, something like that. So lots of money involved in clean lakes. 3 ways to regulate, and this is one that we should all pay attention to. Manure storage ordinance, county-wide or town comprehensive CAFO ordinance. I don't know if P&Z is still working on or not, or going to work on. And county-wide zoning and districting, meaning that you only allow CAFOs in certain areas where they wouldn't affect lakes and rivers, I guess. And I'm assuming there are areas in Oneida County that are like that. Is that correct? Are there areas like that in Oneida County where a CAFO could be cited?
I think you can, right now, you could do general use. You could do unzoned towns.
Yes.
Where else?
Probably residential farming also.
And then it shows a map of,
Don't- We don't have ag zoning today, which is one of the, correct?
John, I don't hear that question. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Bob, but we don't have ag zoning today. We don't have those ag zoning districts.
It would have
Which
to
is
be
also-
developed. Right? But that's one, I'm just listing ways that we could do it. Okay, so anything else you want to say quickly about this document?
The last page is where, in the state where there are CAFO, or livestock sighting programs.
Yep.
Either by county or by township.
And you can't see this, but it has areas, most of them are southern 2/3 of the state. Couple in Bayfield County, and what's the other county up there? What is it?
Douglas.
Douglas, okay. Okay, so there are two up there. The one in Bayfield, they had an ordinance in place, since I understand it. Had a CAFO ordinance, and it was challenged in state because it was in after the fact or something. They didn't go to DNR, have it reviewed, and it was dismissed. And so that pig farm, is that right? What's up there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of Mr. Sweeney's statements was CAFO won't come here because it's so far away from a feed source and so far away from slaughtering. And yet they're doing it in Bayfield County. So I don't know if they brought in their own slaughterhouse and have more access to grain. I don't know. But
There's a lot more ag land. Bayfield.
Yes,
Bob, there's a lot more ag land in Bayfield County than in Oneida County.
okay.
And they're closer to the city of Duluth.
Duluth,
Yeah,
yeah,
so they're
yeah,
far away
right up
from
there.
us, but I think they're close to over there so they can run those trucks.
Yeah. Okay, but I think if anyone comes in and they look at, they're gonna look at economics. Is it viable? Are they gonna make money? And if it is, they make money. So I don't know. Speculation. All right, anything else, Mr. Tony, about that one? Nope. Okay, so I'm done with that. So I'm gonna ask this question, comes next. Recommendations, changes, if any, considering what has been said today and what you've looked at. John, changes in the ordinance that would accommodate the concerns that would have been voiced.
I like the changes that Mr. Giroux suggested, but it seems like a moot point, Bob.
So you don't have anything in particular?
Nope. I'm fundamentally opposed to continuing further with this ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Most of you probably don't know, 90 people, this is an old stat from 2010, it's a lot more now, but 90 people die every day from people that turning out of driveways. 60% of all people get injured, if not dead, from left outs, okay? So we look at driveways that are right in only or right in, right out only. This is a problem, people are dying. But yet, we don't make every driveway right in, right out, but we know that's a lot safer. We could do that, because it'd save a hell of a lot of lives. But we just don't make Michelle drive down, make a U-turn, come back to her house, we let her turn left in, knowing that it's super dangerous. We use data to show us where we have to have these things happen. When I look at these 6 counties that don't have this ordinance, I'll bet you there's a good reason why they don't. There's no farms up here compared to all these other counties. Look at the farms. Maybe I'm wrong, but I bet you that's what makes sense. If you don't have the issue, then don't make them left out right in only. In other words, if you don't have the issue there, nobody's getting hurt, then don't do it. We talked about grandfathering. You can grandfather things if we had some problems starting to come up. We could grandfather those farms in. I am with not doing anything right now, just tabling the subject. Somebody talked about, I think Scott said something about the drainage fields next to the water tables, and then Bob, you said, you know, makes sense what you said, that it's not the same as 100 cows. Okay, well, there's science that goes in with these drainage fields, and Carl knows this. There's permeability of the soil. They get this bio seal on there. So you're putting toxic stuff, and it only goes so far down usually. You take the example, John told me about 140 cows, not John Sweeney, this other guy, I talked to, a consultant that works around the world. In the end, he said, you probably would dig that up and you'd find out it only went 6 inches down. Yeah, that's the bio seal. A lot of times we have this. We don't have this extremity problem. You can always make things sound a lot worse. And I do remember you talking about the trout streams. On the first day we talked about this, and I was 100% with you, Bob, because I'm a trout fisherman. I fished in streams that had cattle pooping in it. It does make a difference. Guess what happens? We get rid of that guy from doing that. We can do it. And the trout come back, we plant them. I say the same thing to Michelle about erosion when we're talking about vegetation. Everybody throws erosion around like it's a deathly term. There's nothing wrong with erosion. It doesn't kill people. You know what you do when the water erodes and all the dirt falls in the river? You take a backhoe and you pull it back out and nobody gets killed. Nobody likes erosion, but don't use it like it's a scare tactic. And that's what we do too many times. This is not a scare tactic that somebody might come in with 150 animals and have a farm. We'll take care of it. We all want clean water, clean air. That's why I'm in favor of just tabling it and just saying, we'll watch it. We'll get Michelle involved. I think it's great. I think it's super we had this. You have done a tremendous job opening this, all the notes up. I've learned a lot, and I just think right now it's okay to table it. The average person says, God, Mike, we worked on this in a year and all this meetings, you're going to table it. Sometimes that's the right thing to do. And I think that's what we are now. I appreciate all the work that everybody did, but that would be my vote, is to just table it.
Okay, thank you. Jim?
When I was originally,
Yes, Ben.
I was originally in favor of moving forward with this kind of a resolution. But as I've talked to people and as I've been educated about things, I have a background in agriculture. Have worked with agriculture for 35 years before I retired, and boy, does it out the brain fast. And I wasn't thinking about some of those things when we first started talking about this, but as I started talking to farmers in our county and I called a couple of ag agents from a couple of other counties that I know of, friends of mine from other counties that I've been associated with, and started asking about these kinds of things. And they enlightened me on a few things as well. And I'm not going to elaborate into any of those right now. But I feel that I think if we would do more in education, we get Michelle out, having meetings with farmers once a year or twice a year, whatever it is, and they can do some comparisons and they can kind of talk and they can learn from themselves, and we can talk about best practices. I like John's idea that we have younger farmers coming in and they may not have the best practices because they did not grow up on a farm and don't have the experience. I think if we were to address that kind of an issue and do educational programming, we do not have an ag agent with UW Extension here.
But we could get one.
Pardon?
We could get one to come in.
But we could certainly, that's exactly what I was gonna say, but we could get one from a neighboring county. I know they have ag agent down in Lincoln County and down in Wausau, in Marathon County, they have ag agents. We could get some of those kind of resources from the university system, to come in and talk and have a meeting with farmers. I think that's a better approach than setting up an ordinance that is not necessary. I appreciate the work that Tom has done. I appreciate the work that Dick Butkus has done.
Dan,
Dan Butkus, sorry.
it's his
And,
cousin.
Huh?
He says it's his cousin.
Dick is his cousin, okay. And Michelle was done. I appreciate the work you guys have done, but I think we're to a point where we might, I'm ready to just table this. And it was a good idea. I would rather have us work on salt on the roads. I think we need, we have much more of an issue with salt going directly into the water streams. And that's something I'd rather tackle.
To that comment, I'm gonna say something, is that we're having reconstruction done in the town of Sheffield, where there goes right past California. And I asked them if there's some way to divert or whatever, because we are worried about that runoff in the roads and something they're considering. So, yeah, thank you. Mr. Tomey.
What was your question
Well, the question is, considering
Mr.
all
Mon-
that we've heard,
You got a legal,
And I don't know exactly how to construe this, but both I don't know if Mr. Roach made a formal motion, but Mr. Roach and Mr. Winkler both used the same language in terms of wishing to table this.
yes.
I don't know if that is construed as a motion or a second, or if that's something that they're clarifying, but
I'm gonna let the people finish and then we'll go back to them.
okay.
Okay,
Thanks, Mike.
Mr. Tomey.
Tell me what your question was again.
Who is buried in Grant's tomb? I'm gonna start off easy.
The question was if there were things to the existing ordinance that we could change to make it palatable, right?
After hearing all the comments.
Mr. Tomey, so, yeah, exactly. So how would you change it considering what you've heard?
There's two things that come to my mind. The stacks seem to be a problem. The ordinance is really for facilities, not stacks. So maybe we massage that. The setbacks are problematic if you have a small piece of property. So on the right-hand side of the unique sheet, maybe we look at that. I still like the 100, I still like the number, but that's maybe not in our, maybe we cannot do that. Limiting the number, start at a number, pick a number, 100, whatever, 140, whatever number it is. But I'm not certain that that's gonna pass the muster.
Finished?
Yep.
Okay. Mitch?
Yes, I agree with Mike and Jim. And the other comment I wanted to make with what I talked about earlier is, you know, we did a year or so on this and it's created more confusion than it's done anything else. Because obviously that's why we're having a discussion, because not very many people understand this. So as far as adding or taking away from this, you know, ordinance as it is right now, I think it's got to be scrapped and you can start over with it, because we're duplicating a lot of the state things and it makes it more confusing for everybody, because I certainly learned a lot, but I got very confused on a lot of things. So if we're gonna entertain a motion in, you know, today, you know, I'm waiting for that, I guess. But that was my comment, that it's more confused. I don't think it can be fixed because it's too complicated the way it is. That's it.
What is that?
I'll finish with committee. Comment to that is that, you know, as a committee member, you certainly can ask for clarification areas that appear confusing, and we would appreciate that.
Well,
Okay,
you know, a lot of it is the first thing that's confusing is, okay, was this written for, you know, a large operation or is it for the small ones? Nobody really said definitely one way or the other. You know, that's a confusing thing. Nobody's came out and said definitely this is for a certain number of, you know, live and above. That's one confusing thing right there.
Okay, thank you. Rob,
Thanks, Bob. Rob Jensen, 3112 Pleasure Point Drive.
I'm saving mine to after you're done.
Yes, okay. Hopefully I have more than 3 minutes.
That's fine.
Um,
Just go ahead.
I was a member of this committee when it started. I think it was started way back, Bob, when they were putting human waste on fields and discussions started and then we did the
That was a
moratorium
Stella problem.
at the county board.
Yeah.
And I think you'll remember a lot of times my position was, what is it that we need to do to make sure people have the information to be knowledgeable decision makers? And the question is, how does this impact the local farmer? They don't know. Because for whatever reason, there's always mistrust when more government gets involved. They don't know what's in this. They don't know what the state statute says. They may not know what the ordinance says, and that's just human nature. So this matter of trust has been broken down over years. People are afraid of more government, more regulations. There's a lot of things in this ordinance I think that are good, and that the state statute covers them. What I have to commend you on is you sent out 270 letters. Where would we be today if those 270 letters never went out? You might end up like the other 61 counties. But we don't really know. Well, we're gonna pass this. But you let people know what's happening. They came out and they expressed some concerns. I also, you heard me say this many times, I said it with the Lake Association, when the lake districts are being formed. Get information out, let people know the pros and cons so that they can trust what's going on, okay? You're now talking about educating. What should have been done is look at these ordinances from the other counties. Find out, okay, now let's educate people as to what's in there. What, is it an issue? You're gonna get there. Right? My thought was you should have educated first. Bring these people in, talk to them, find out what the issues are, how this can be handled. I think you're gonna get there. You've got UW Extension. You're always saying, how do you validate what they're doing? Have them take it up. I don't know necessarily going to put it on Michelle's shoulders that she's going to be responsible for educating. I think she's responsible for letting UW Extension people know what they need to be doing, and they develop a plan of attack to do that. And just one other thing, you have to be careful. I remember the Lake Association. Someone said Lake Association members testified in favor of this. All I remember from the Crescent Lake Association, an email came out saying that there was going to be a public hearing. I do not believe the Crescent Lake Association nor the Crescent Lake District took a formal vote on this ordinance. So always be careful when you hear of a special interest group, somebody from that saying this is what the position is. I'm not sure that's true. You always have to be kind of careful of that when special interest groups get involved. The only thing I would suggest to you is if you do make a motion, don't table it, because Robert's rule says what you should do is you should postpone indefinitely. I think that's the issue. I think you've done a lot of good work here. I was on this committee and we all agree about clean land water in our lakes and rivers. But things get blown out of proportion so quickly. Everybody learned a lot, and I commend you for your efforts and look forward to see where you go from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen.
Good comment.
I'm gonna pass something out. This is my suggestion.
Would it be possible to pull up on the video what you've just handed out, Bob?
Possible. Let me read it, John, and then see if you need to look at it.
Okay.
Okay, John is not here. Our screen is blank. It's got a big box up there.
But if you take a picture with it and send it to Michelle, she can put it on the PDF right now, right?
Yeah, we'll just wait a minute and see if you can get it, John.
John, are you there?
I'm here.
I'm gonna send you a text with a picture, or I'll send it to your email if you could pop that up when it comes through.
Have you been seeing anything that I have been putting up?
Oh,
No,
Actually,
you've been
well-
putting stuff up?
I have. I've been sharing the state regs. I had the MSO ordinance up for a little bit.
Do you have something up now, John?
Yeah,
I saw them, Jonna.
oh, you did?
was temporary. We don't see anything now that you're sharing. But I did see the regs pop up.
Johnny, you want to say something, please?
Sure. What would you like me to say? Actually, I'm sharing Chairman
go.
Mott's request.
We got it.
Okay, we got her.
Okay.
That's not what we're looking at now, but we do have something.
Coming.
It'll be, we'll just take a little bit of time because I would like everyone to be able to see this.
If you could make it larger would be nice.
Sure. As soon as I get something from Michelle, I'll have to go check my email because it's on my computer at home. And then I have to save it.
It's on its way.
Okay. You sent that to my work
Your
email?
Oneida-
or-
Your Oneida County email.
Okay, then I'm in the wrong spot here.
Is that one okay? Or would you like it differently?
Well, hang on, I haven't received it yet, so. Perhaps because I'm remote, it's not coming very quickly. Do you want to try to send it to the other one?
I'm gonna text it to you as well.
Well, text, I can't get it off.
I don't think I have your home email address right handy on my phone here, Jana, so.
That's how Hillary got into trouble, wasn't it?
Can you see us? Can you see us?
Yes.
You can see,
Hold it
you
in
can
front
see,
of the camera.
you can see the room, yeah?
Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to whoever's listening.
A little
Can you
closer.
see that?
Well, currently I'm looking for an email, so I can't see anything except my email.
Can you see it?
John and Mitch. can
Little
you see
closer,
what-
Bob. Little closer. Okay,
I don't think I'm gonna be able to read it if you wanted to just read it to us or send it to me and I'll get it on my email.
how about Bob just read it? It's okay.
Yeah, Bob, read it.
All right, suggested revisions to Oneida County Manure Management Storage Ordinance. 1, Chapter 28, the Oneida County, Wisconsin Manure Storage and Management Ordinance applies to any farming operation with 100 or more head or equivalent animal units. 2, so that would be stated right to start. And the reason I have that in there is because I would like to see something in place in case a larger operation comes into effect. I am still concerned that, in my mind, 100 animal units or equivalent, quite a few cattle, whatever. And there's an equation in there, I think Bob has that, about how many pigs that would be, how many chickens that would be, and so on. This would take completely out of this, except for the laws stated on this paper, the 4 that are in state statute already about polluting from manure runoff, from a farmyard, from manure stacks and so on. It's already on the books. That would still apply to those small farmers. And that's where the education would come in. If they don't know about it, we're gonna educate people. They want to listen. So that takes that group of people, I don't think there was one person that came in and talked that has 100 or more head or animal units. But to me, I picked the number. I talked about it for a long time. It's been advised. Tom advised against it. Mr. Daigle advised against it. Michelle advised against it. So be it. I want to make this, I'd like to have this on the books. And the discussion about and we pass this, at least it gives us something if large producers come in. And I don't want to fight small farmer, it wasn't our intent to start with. If they're polluting, don't pollute. There are laws on the books against it, but we're looking, in my mind, right at the start, at the larger groups. That's how this whole thing started. Second, any farm operation with 100 or more animal units or equivalent will, supposed to be 100 more head or equivalent animal units, will file each year on or before December 1st for the following calendar year, a nutrient management plan. How are you going to take care of your manure? Are you going to store it? Are you going to have a storage facility? Are you going to spread it periodically? How are you going to do it? What are you going to do with it? And that will be reviewed and approved by the United County Land and Water Department and the United County Planning and Zoning Department. Any changes, additions, corrections will be discussed with the landowner in a timely manner to assure a responsible nutrient plan for the following year. Might be as simple as saying, we're gonna do the same thing we did this year. We passed it this year, we're gonna do the same thing for next year. That's how simple it could be. In my mind, what this does is gives the county a chance to look at a plan that you have that could say, determine if there is a possibility of pollution or not. And if it's a good plan, and I'm sure we're not going to have very many of these people. I have 1, 2, 3 maybe farms that come in. It's not going to be overburdened. It's on the screen now for John. Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and Mitch?
Yes, I can see it.
Very good. All right. And it'll take care of the small farmer because they're not even going to be considered. It's going to take care of the large farmers between that, in my mind, 100 and 500, where the state may step in. Because those are the ones that worry me more. And so this is the way I looked at it. And you can debate the number, you can debate what's here, you can say this stinks, we don't want to do it. But in my mind, what we do is take this, send it to DATCAP, send it to the DNR, share it with the farmers. And our corporation council will take a look at it and see if this passes muster or not. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. So I would just like to ask the group what they think. Jim?
Well, I think this makes a lot of sense. I guess I would have a question about 100 or more. Only by the fact that we have a ferret family, a ferret farm in the county. And they, I forgot how many number of head they have, but I think it's closer to.
Well, let me go into that.
Or
They're equivalents. So this would equal X number of pigs, or
Right.
X
So
number of
the way it
chickens.
works, the average cow is 1,400 pounds. So it's based on 100 pounds, 1,000 pounds. So they're 1.4 animal units,
There'd be a lot of ferrets.
right? So you'd have a ton of ferrets. I tried to use that example for deer because doggone it, the DNR called their deer for deer. And I got about 30 of them crapping in my yard, running right down into the lake, and no one seems to be helping it. But I did it, it would be several hundred animal units, would be several hundred deers. So so it just doesn't work for that, but ferrets should have
Maybe
a
a
billion.
lot.
all right, well, that's where when you start talking numbers,
Yeah,
you know, I didn't realize.
yeah, he's got it on that sheet there too.
If you
He's
saw
got it right
that,
here.
Oh, I didn't.
they talk about, so one animal unit is one cow. Okay, one beef cattle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
1,000
part of
pounds.
a dairy cow, because dairy cows weigh more,
Right,
but you got chickens. So you've got, here's 125,000 broiler chickens for every, and then pigs.
and here's Lincoln. So I don't know how big a fair it is.
They're real light.
I mean, they're small. Is it 2 pounds? Is it 2 pounds? Is
They're
it
the
3
ones that
pounds?
kill the monkeys.
Yeah. So let's say it's something like 80,000. Yeah, and that ferret farm is south of, Elgin.
Mink farm, same
I
thing.
mean, yeah, there's a mink farm out too. that I know of.
Yeah, but they would not be impacted by
Okay,
this.
all right, well, that's, when you say numbers,
Yep, I know
you
that.
think, okay.
Yep.
What is 100 chickens versus 100?
Be 1,000, 100, couple thousand chickens.
With Bob's example, would be like 70 cows.
Yeah, okay, all right.
And if we will need to adjust it, we can. But I just put that number down because in my mind, 70, 100 on the hook animals.
Now, that brings up a question though, because when I was reading in that cap, they talked about nutrient
Management,
management. And I was thinking, we don't have anything on the books for nutrient management?
Carl,
No. Okay, all right.
state does though.
The state does, yeah, I read all kinds of stuff in the state about nutrient management.
Sometimes it applies, if you're asking for state grants for certain things, you have to have a nutrient management program on the books.
It can cost between $2,000 and $5,000 a year to bring in a consultant and do a nutrient management plan.
But there's also cost share, right?
I don't know
Yes.
on that one.
Yeah, there are programs, and also, John, farmers can do their own nutrient management plan.
Yeah, but as I'm sure you know that it's not recommended. It's like being your own attorney.
Right, that's kind of what I
Bob said.
learned. Cost share, but it can get expensive.
Well, here's who's gonna review this? This is gonna be reviewed by our land and water. It's not going to the state, it's not going to DAP, it's not going to DNR, it's us gonna take a look at it. And we
But the
can, in
nutrient,
fact,
to have a viable nutrient management plan, it has to be filed with the state, if I'm not mistaken. There's some, and if you got 100 head or more, you probably want that anyhow. So I'm not saying that it's an impossibility, but when you think about it, there is some expense associated with it, developing a nutrient management plan.
well, I think what we do is look at that and discuss it. It's just, this is for discussion right now.
Mhm.
And it's looking at a way to avoid the small farmer and the problems that seem to be caused by what we had sent in. And we're looking at somebody that has a larger operation, may produce more manure, will produce more manure, and how they're gonna manage that. I
Yeah,
think that
Bob,
is
you,
a legitimate question to ask.
it addresses the fundamental hangup that we've had, right? That, we're trying to address the larger operations, but we're impacting the smaller ones, even if we can't quite quantify what that is. And by putting a number in there, at least you've made that demarcation.
And that was the
Unfortunate.
exact intent of doing this.
Yep.
Okay. All right,
Well,
are you done?
no,
John?
I'm not done. As I'm thinking back, I asked a couple of farmers how many head they have on their farms. Now, we have, I'm thinking about one in Newbold. They have about 40 horses. And they have about 25, 50 head of cattle. So, I mean, they're gonna get up there close to that 90 or 100. So I'm just wondering if we want to have 150 or more, or something like that, just so that we don't have, I still trust farmers to make the right decision. And do we want to burden them with some sort of a regulation that's going to burden them? I don't know. So maybe I'm just thinking 125 or more.
Number is negotiable.
Okay.
Mike,
Yeah, I'm against this because I thought of this the day we had that informational meeting. And that's what comes out of the informational meeting is information. That's where you start really kind of thinking about it in the second year. I know some people slandered us, said, oh, you're gonna shoot it down. I just tried to stay open-minded, listen to you guys, what you're saying, and everybody. What I find is, again, I'm writing down some examples that pop in my head, Bob, like, if it's a critical death thing that you're dealing with, it's gonna affect people really bad. I think we all got, and some of us might not know it. Now, remember, we're not experts, but we're talking to experts. So when the expert says something, we're like, wow, I didn't know that. So we're trying to put our ideas together. Is this something really critical? Like the left out move kills a lot of people, but you can't, the data doesn't lie. Where's the data on all these people that die from having 70 cows? Just isn't gonna be there.
Well,
Let me finish up.
Okay.
So the example I came up, Bob, was, because Milwaukee has taverns galore on their city, everybody's drinking. And up here, we got 7 bars. Should that make us so?
on one corner.
Yeah, so just up here, in the area per square mile, the bars down there are so many that do you know that they put this law that says you gotta blow a certain amount of oxygen and you can go to jail, you can be in trouble? We don't need that law, Bob, because up here, we only have a few bars. That would be wrong, right? We all know that. Because the same guy in the one bar in the county can leave and get drunk and kill people. It makes sense. It's a dangerous thing. This is not that. So the more we talk about this, the more I realize we don't have any problems. These 6 counties that don't have this are full of lakes. They don't have very many farms either. Bayfield does, I know they do. So I'm just taking and looking at this from the 30,000-foot view saying, don't put, I thought the same thing that day. And I thought, this is a good idea. Let's just make it, because what we're trying to do, like we just said, you perfectly said it. We're trying to protect the little guys. They don't have any problems. And before the CAFO kicks in, we got that taken care of. We're trying to hit that medium, whatever it is, right? But as soon as you do that, all of a sudden next year, somebody else is in here and said, we need to beef that up to 200, or maybe we got to drop it down to 50. Don't even have a policy. We don't have the people to run this anyway and regulate it. We don't have a problem. If we do, we'll take care of it. It's not a dangerous thing right now. At least I can't, no one shared that with me, that we got people tipping over dead. And so that example I give you is when Oneida County only has a few farms, so Roach says he doesn't want it. That would be like saying, we only have 1 bar, so he doesn't want DUI. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that case I do because it's critical. People will die if you don't have those regulations involved. We got to stop that. This, not so much.
Okay, the only thing I comment on, Mike, is we're not talking about death here. We're talking, unless you talk about death of a lake or death of a stream, as you commented before, that we saw a situation where trout were killed in the stream because of runoff. These laws, these ordinances are going to do 2 things. One, they're going to, this one in particular, I think, is going to address that when there's a large number come in. We're not concerned about you and your wife. We're concerned about you, but we're not concerned that you're going to damage a stream or a lake because you're a small operation, okay? If it is happening, we'd like you not to do it, but that's at this point up to you. Or if somebody reports what's happening, they see, I can remember one, I used to live in Neenah, come on Highway D, because I love back roads. Just before we got into Anago, over hit 45 south of Anago, there was a barnyard there that had a stream running right by it, and there was poop and junk flowing into that. I can still see it right now. And we don't want that to happen. And that wasn't a big operation. They probably had 20 head, maybe something like that. So that it's on the books right now. We will do education. But let me stop. Just a minute. Okay, let me finish. When this size, which I consider large, maybe they don't in the world of Oklahoma, but here it is. they could have an impact, and that's why all I'm saying is that get something this size comes in or larger, right up that CAFO thing, that we have a way to deal with it. And right now, we don't, as I understand it. So the plan, you know, I mean, there are a lot of reasons not to have it, but in my mind, they have that many head, it's a larger operation. They could afford an initial plan, and we could work with them to get something like that. So it's not death, it's not danger, except the threat that it has on the lakes. And that's my concern.
So just to follow up, it's not death. Let's use this word, irreversible. When somebody dies in an auto accident from a drunk driver, it's irreversible.
Yeah.
When I'm building a road and the whole embankment goes in the river,
Mhm.
it's reversible. We pick it back up, we put it back up there. That's what I'm talking about. We don't have a problem. We don't see a problem in our county. Why the hell are we gonna put more government in here? When, if we do get it, it's reversible. Almost always reversible. You're just putting more time and money in government, is what I'm saying. We had to look at it, because we do have, you look at the map of Wisconsin, this is where all the beautiful lakes are. I agreed with you. From the step one, you talked about trout, and I said, yep, this makes sense. Let's look at it. Now I see it, and we don't have a problem existing. We're worried about this medium-sized farm coming in. It'll be reversible if it happens. It can be reversed. It's not something that's not, I use death, but anything can't be reversed. That's what I was saying.
But as a responsible road builder, you already know that you gotta put in your silt fences. You can't.
You
go
try to
this
avoid
close
it.
to it. You don't look at that angle, that whole thing.
So stay with that. Tom.
And you've got that law in
Right,
place. That's,
right.
that's your practice.
Because it happens. We see erosion all over. Michelle sees it everywhere. People excavate, erosion. We don't see all this farming, solid waste. Solid waste is, I think, 16%, okay, the percent of the volume. So poop gets liquid at certain points, they piston gear it up into the pipes you were talking about.
Yeah.
We just don't see that here.
Yeah.
We see erosion.
We don't want to see it either.
We don't want to see erosion either, but we see it, so we had to put laws here. If we see this problem of the storage waste, we'll put it in place then.
I'm gonna take that comment you had right now, because Mitch and John, we'll get to you in just a second. What happens if that 101 comes in on 200, 300, 400, 500? Right? If that happens without any regulations right now, do we have something that would address them?
There is no ordinance that would regulate manure because we don't have the manure storage ordinance. The only thing that regulates the placement of farms or agriculture is zoning right now in Atlantic County.
And
Your
if
zoning
they come in
districts, what
after,
is allowed in the various districts.
if we come in after the fact, can it be addressed? Can we make an ordinance like, could I put this in? after
I
the fact?
don't believe it can. For example, at committee Wednesday for planning development, we just discussed tourist rooming houses and going retroactive to require everyone to renew a permit. Council came and said, we believe that you can require new applicants to renew, but you cannot go back retroactively and make them renew. I don't believe you can go back.
So they'd be grandfathered, but carry on, if somebody did something wrong to our groundwater, it's reversible. And
Oh,
these
yes.
these laws, Bob, would take care of that. So we shouldn't be so worried about this 140 cows like this John guy gave me. What are you gonna do, Mike? Turns out it's reversible. And we can make them reverse it. So if we had erosion all over, instead of erosion substituted with storage waste problems, we see it, we only got little farms, then I'd agree with you, but right now we're not seeing anything. So let's worry about it when it comes. Let's not just start putting laws in place like the strip bars. That made sense. It was irreversible. Once it's in, you can't get it out now. This you can. It's reversible, and we want less government right now. We don't want to keep putting these in. It's a great idea, and this makes sense what you wrote up at first glance, and then you have to think about it. And that's what I arrive at. Let's not do it because it'll just go down. It has ability to have just laws on the books where we don't have problems right now. And if we did, it's reversible.
So Tom, question.
So, once the lake has been impacted by manure and it gets into the sediment system, and Michelle can attest to this, it's very, very difficult to reverse it. There are lakes all over the state, Shawano, Winnebago, that have this, peat, well, Castle Rock, have this immense amount of nutrients poured into them. And it gets into the sediment and it starts cycling in the system. You can cut it off and stop it, but you still have all that sediment and it does not reverse itself very easily. You can make some improvements, but you're not going to put it back to the way our lakes are right now.
Hundreds of years of happening of big farms makes sense. That would make sense that that happens. Up here, we don't have that. And the day we start getting big farms, we'll meet again and say, now it's time. But right now, we don't.
Well, I think that's the old argument about proactive versus reactive. You know, and that's each individual's decision on that.
Proactive, if it's non-reversible, is a whole different if it's reversible. Whole different argument.
John, comment.
I actually like Rob Jensen's comments about putting the horse ahead of the cart, right? Where I really think we need to indefinitely postpone our action on the manure storage ordinance and focus on where we can do proactive things, but more along the lines of education and zoning. I would really like to see us have the ag zoning in place countywide, at which point then you can write ordinances around where we have ag zoning. And whether it's 175 or 150, I do like that point, Bob, because I do think that's a huge difference to me, at least, as to whether it fits within the realm of the types of farms we have in our county.
And that was the intent, certainly.
Mhm.
Okay, Mitch, comment.
Well, yeah, as far as your changes, like filing every year, a nutrient management plan, we don't have the expertise to even think about reviewing somebody's, and with all the comments I've heard, I'm going to make a motion that we table this.
I think we're going to complete discussion before that, Mitch, but
To make a motion. We have definite numbers here. We don't have anything concrete. You're proposing changing things, but it's still not concrete. We just had 10 minutes, 15 minutes of discussion, how many chickens versus how many cows. And nobody came to a conclusion. So I wanted to make the motion that we table this. We've been discussing it. I think that's the general feeling of the, majority of the people here. If there's a second, fine. If there's not, there's not.
I'd like you to specifically address the change that I made. What is it you don't like about it?
Mr. Mott, I believe Mr. Roach did second the motion to table.
Okay, it's discussion time. I'm
Yeah.
discussing.
Yep.
Okay. Good. Is it the number or the,
It's all of it. I mean, we don't have a concrete number. We don't have the expertise to do a nutrient plan.
I think we do have a concrete number, 100 or more head for equivalent animal units. That's in a particular number.
Well, as far as who's going to review a nutrients management plan? Are we going to hire somebody for $100,000 a year on the county budget to have somebody sitting in Land and Water that has the expertise to do that?
Well, I ask Michelle and Carl because they're the ones that be tasked with it.
And the other issue that I have with this whole thing is the enforcement of it. We don't have enough manpower to enforce what we have now, and we put more laws on the book, ordinances on the books who's going to enforce it? There's still a whole bunch of discrepancy on the permitting fee and the fines and all that kind of stuff. That was never, in my opinion, was never really solidified as them are the correct numbers that we should have. And there's some debate about whether it's part of the ordinance or not. I can't remember exactly what happened at the meeting about that, but Holowinski brought it up I think that some of the things weren't done correctly. So I'm still confused on it also. That's where I stand on it.
Okay. Other comments? There is a motion on the floor, and I think that the term was indefinitely postponed. Is that correct?
The motion was made to table it, and that was seconded. I mean, to remove, you could go through the removing from the table process at that point. It may not be the most artful way to make the motion, but that is what is on the floor and seconded.
Okay. How does that differ from indefinitely postponed?
And I don't have my book with me, but I believe that indefinitely postpone, you can set a way that you bring it back. I believe a motion to table it is seconded. I believe that requires a 2/3 to bring it back. But
Mike, you proposed the table.
I think Jim made the motion, or.
Mitch made the motion.
Motion, and I said, that.
Okay, and so
well, and
what would you suggest if they want to withdraw and propose a different motion?
well, you would have to vote on the motion to table that was then seconded, and vote that down, and then you could go back and come up with a different motion. There was immediately before that, I believe, John had made a motion to postpone, proceed with education, and then review it. You could set, if you do something you could either do an indefinite postpone with some type of structure, or you could postpone and say, bring it back, the first meeting of some month, whatever year. The motion to table is not preferred because it requires a higher threshold in order to bring it back.
I got a suggestion.
What would you like to?
Just by listening to Mike say that, maybe we do this, we gotta vote this, but then we all want her to get, outreach. I think that's what we all had talked about, but to make a motion to table this until, instead of a different date, until we get 4, 5, 10, 100 unit farms or more, then we start looking at this. That makes sense to me and say, holy cow, we no longer have 20 cattle. Now we got people moving up here with 70. It's not a big deal. The world isn't gonna end. But if we get 4 more of these, then we're gonna get together and we're gonna put this 100 head in, and we're gonna put it in place, even if those 4 have to grandfather. That makes sense to most people, I would think. The constituents we talk to. Don't make anything right now. But if you see these bigger farmers coming up, then we should look at it. That would make sense.
Right, this is Mitch again. My intention was not to table it, forever. I would like to, like the council was talking about, how do I make the motion to, postpone it? Like Supervisor Roach was saying, that we can bring it back when we need to bring it back. That's my intention.
So if you vote on the motion to table and it is voted down, you can then make a motion to postpone it until either a specific time or a specific action.
Can't be so general as number of large operations.
Well, I mean, that would be a specific action.
Exceeding 100 animals, we get 5 of these farms move up here. I would think the 5 is something we start looking at. If it's over 100. Now, the problem with that, I just thought of, you get one that comes in that's 400 and doesn't hit the CAFO, but now he's got a pretty significant, so we gotta be careful,
I would say a large operation.
Then we get back together.
That'd be my suggestion. It's up to you.
I would define what a large operation is.
Yeah, it's got
Because to some people, 50 is large, to some people, 496 isn't. So I would,
150. Like,
Yeah, let me just see how many cows that is, mature cows, so.
Yeah.
Roughly be
Yeah,
100
that's all
cows.
right. Um,
What's that referred to as animal units? I mean,
yes,
okay, thank you.
That'll get the 700, the 7 dairy cows, that's 700, 1,400.
So you'd say a certain number of animal
150 will
units.
get,
150.
150 will get to the
Yeah.
7.
But that would be after we vote the table down. And then come back.
You would vote the motion
postpone
to table
and-
down, and then you would bring up this new motion. And if you're going to do that, I would have a definition of an animal unit.
It's contained in the paperwork that Mr. Tony has.
And
Referring to what,
and I would therefore incorporate that by reference in the motion.
got that, Mike?
Yeah.
So
First, we have to vote to the table.
So if we have an animal unit of 200 ferrets, one farm of 200 ferrets and another farm of 200, where's the other one?
You gotta start with the animal. unit
Cows.
By the cow.
Okay, so the cow is the definition.
Cows.
Okay, that's the standard.
Yep.
All right.
Well,
No,
I don't-
No,
I
no.
don't think that- No, the 1,000 pounds of any animal is the unit. So a cow, a mature cow is 1,400 pounds. So if you said 150 animal units, you take 150 times 1,000, right? Because that's how many animals, so that gives you 150,000, you divide that by 1,400, and you'd get 100,000.
You know, which is about.
We have a definition right here, Mike.
Yep, right, I'm just trying to say, divided by 1,400 is 107 cows.
Yeah, animal unit.
That's in that whole people.
What's the largest farmer you had up here, 50? Sweeney said he might have had 50 at one time.
That's what he told us.
Yeah, I think so.
So 150 animal units is 107 mature cows. If we start seeing those come here, well, I think we should get back together.
All right. All right, I don't know if you heard the discussion, John and Mitch, we're talking about changing the idea of tabling and using the word postpone later on. But the suggestion is that we vote this table down, allow Mike or someone to make a motion about postponing. Are you on board with that? I mean, have you heard that discussion?
I am if Mitch is.
I am too. I'm for, let's make, vote on the tabling. And then it was a little hard to hear some of your numbers because some people are talking over other people, and when you're on Zoom, it's a little harder. So if Mike wants to make the next motion, that would be fine because he's actually he can hear than I can. So I'm okay with what we're about to do.
All right, let's vote on the motion to table then. All in favor of tabling, say aye.
Aye.
Is this,
No, I think you want to vote this down.
I thought we wanted to vote this down so we could put the new motion.
Correct.
Let's try that again.
Oh, yeah.
So what this is saying is just table right now. Court counsel suggested we might want to postpone as a different way of saying it. That way, we would proceed with the education and then consider it again in the future based on whatever the person proposing the motion would do. So I'm going to try one more time. All in favor of tabling at this time, say aye. All opposed, say nay. Nay. Okay, so that did not carry. So now, Mike, you want to make it?
Mike, did you want me to give you some language and you can work from there?
Yeah.
That you, and so postpone until such time as operations exceeding whatever number of animal units equaling 1,000 pounds of live animal weight. So I don't know what I don't know the exceeding number would be.
We talked 150.
So I just wanted to ask everybody that's here, I heard the constituents say up to 50 animals, the most I've ever heard. John Sweeney said at one time he had 50 cows, but usually it's 20 to 50. How many cows what's the most amount of animal units or cows that, let's use cows, that you've heard of?
I called John Sweeney back and I said, you said on average 50 cows. How many do you have at the most any time of the year? He says, well, sometimes we'll get up to 75 and then they do whatever they do and then it's down to. So I'd say, I feel comfortable with 100 head.
See, I think 100 head's only 71 cows, so I think what you're talking about is 200 head would be 140 cows. Otherwise, you're gonna put these people into a position where they're, so 200 would be roughly 142 cows. That's at least we're doing something after all this work. We're doing what we said. We're not gonna affect the small ones after you get the CAFOs kick in, that's the larger ones. We're hitting in between. We're saying 200. So we'll table this. I'm talking to everybody here, asking what seems reasonable.
You're saying 200.
Mike.
200 animal units would come out if you, to about 142 adult cows, okay, beef cattle. And that puts Holowinski's people in Sugar Camp, they're fine, these guys are fine, and it protects us. I want to say that when that first farm comes in, or maybe we should say 5 or 2 farms. I'm hearing from Bob that he wants 1, and I'm okay, I think, with that.
Because then you can start talking about it.
You can start talking about it. This would have to be run by the county board or not? The full county board, if this motion passes today.
No, I mean, you're just making a motion for how your committee's gonna operate regarding MSO.
Correct.
And what you're doing, if what I hear you saying is you're gonna postpone until such time as an operation exceeding 200 animal units comes into the county, an animal unit equaling 1,000 pounds of animal live weight.
Right. Do you feel okay with that, or do you said 2 farms, or you?
No, that'd be fine.
1 farm?
One farm.
Mitch, John, is that something that you're?
So actually, you should probably make your motion and then discuss, and if there's a consensus to change it, you could then change it, but
That'd be in discussion.
I'll second that motion.
All right.
Then you start.
It's been moved and seconded. Did you state your motion?
Yeah, the motion.
200 animal units, right?
200 animal units when we first get 1 farm in Oneida County with 200, fitting the definition of greater than 200 animal units, that we get together and as a committee again and review this
And the
again.
word postpone.
and
We're tabling it and.
No,
Postponing it.
postponing.
would you like me to restate your motion for
Yeah,
you?
that'd be great.
I will restate your motion.
Perfect.
And then if you agree, then someone could second. You want to postpone the manure storage ordinance until such time as an operation exceeding 200 animal units comes into the county with an animal unit equaling 1,000 pounds of live animal weight.
Second.
Yeah, I agree.
That's your motion.
Can you say that again, with an animal unit equaling what?
With an animal unit equaling 1,000 pounds of live animal weight. And then that is Mr. Roach, your motion.
Yeah, before I agree to that, I wanted to ask a legal question. What's the difference between postponing and table?
Where that was.
Table requires an additional,
No, but it's not consent.
tabling requires an additional vote, and it requires a larger. So if you table something and you want to remove something from the table, you have to have a 2/3 majority, and there has to be an interval of time. So by doing it postponed, you're saying, look, this means that if this happens, then we can actually put
So
it on
if
the
a farmer
agenda.
comes in with 150 cows, we'd be able to get back together, right?
Well,
Okay.
your motion was 200.
200 animal.
Yeah,
200
animals.
142.
142 cows roughly, yeah.
Okay,
Correct.
now, one question, Mike, do you want to include that education part with it or not?
Yeah, I do want to include that.
Okay,
That I would also want, in the motion that we put outreach in there. That Oneida County should have outreach to the small farmers. And the educational part, right?
You may want to do that as a separate motion because that's gonna move, because your motion to postpone should stand alone. And then you can just
Yeah.
provide direction
Yeah,
to
two different
staff.
motions.
So
so restate this one, Mary, if you would.
Motion by Roach, and who's the other person? To postpone MSO until such time as operations exceeding 200 animal units comes into Oneida County with an animal unit equaling 1,000 in weight.
1,000 pounds of live
Pounds.
animal weight.
And that would apply to pigs, would apply to sheep, it would
Parrots.
apply to parrots, the whole thing.
Fish.
At least, you at least then have a way to calculate live animal weight.
Correct. All right, any question, Mitch or John?
I'm good with that.
Okay,
No
all in
questions.
favor? Sorry,
Bob,
John.
I'd like to request a roll call vote, please.
Certainly, yep, I'll start. Is Mary, you want to call them off? Or do we want me to call them off? Who calls them off? Me? I can do
Actually, usually like.
it.
Mary
The
would
clerk or.
in this case.
Okay,
Okay, Mr. Winkler,
aye.
Mr. Mott,
Aye.
Mr. Tony,
Aye.
Mr. Roach,
Aye.
Mr. Engel,
Aye.
oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Ives.
Aye.
All right, passed unanimously. Propose another one, you want me to do it or what? The education, or do we need a motion to do that, or just?
I don't think you don't necessarily need a motion to provide direction to staff to, you can ask Michelle to come up with a plan to do education. I mean, however you'd like to provide her some
I'm gonna
direction.
ask Michelle on Carl Bowles, how you want to.
I will excuse myself unless you need me further.
We're good, thanks.
We'll have
Thank you for
to.
coming today.
I've got some ideas, I just need a little time to
regroup
kind
and we'll
of,
have to come back.
yeah, develop something up.
All right, I did.
Chairman Mott, would it be possible to add this as a standing item on the agenda, at least for our next few meetings?
Certainly can put that on the agenda, Mary, make a note of that.
Just wait.
Not MSO, outreach.
Mitch,
I hope so.
Mitch,
Yes.
I would just, with Michelle and Carl, the UW extension, maybe Jim can answer this. Do they have an educator for this kind of stuff, with the nutrient management stuff? Is there an educator that can come in temporarily if we request it?
yeah, I believe they are available. We can call them in. They have area representatives that we can contact and see what they'd suggest. May have happened in Maritime County or other counties, and we could pattern our response or education after that.
No, ag agents in area 4, which is Forest, Oneida and Florence.
But there are specialists that
Yes.
could come from the state
Yes.
that would do it. So I make note of that, and I think maybe make contact with them if you would, Mary, and just have them contact Michelle. Okay, so the understanding today is that there will be outreach. Michelle and Carl will talk about that, and with the advice of UW Extension state representatives in this area, about how to best do this, what best practices are, to educate the small farmers in Oneida County. Are you okay? You're extremely quiet today, Michelle. I'm worried.
Just, you're worried. No, taking it all in.
Okay.
It just,
Shell shock,
I'm sorry?
shell shock.
There may be that. Been a lot of work put into this. I want to thank you very much. I want to thank Carl as well, the committee, Tom, Dan. Extremely worried about Dan because he didn't say anything today. But thank you, and thank you for coming today in this cold day to be here, all of you. And it is not what I envisioned totally,
Right.
but it's something that what we're trying to do is protect the county waters if a larger operation comes in, and this is a larger operation we're talking about. And if it happens, I'm not gonna be here after April, after March, actually. So I want y'all to promise me that you will continue this, that this isn't gonna be forgotten. It's not gonna be put on the shelf if this happens, because I think it's a real concern. So I'm assuming that once with this vote today, that you will be doing that and continuing that. Thank you.
Chairman Mott,
Yes, sir.
I'd bet good money that there's no way we'd come out of this meeting today with a unanimous vote on anything. So compliments to you for finding a compromise. Thank you.
Thank you, John. We will, it'll be understood then that Michelle's gonna pursue that with Carl. And we will have updates at each conservation meeting. All right? Any other comments for today? Any public comment at all? Mr. and Mrs.?
Thanks for reminding us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your work.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming. All right, with that, we, yes, Tom.
So, I am disappointed. I thought the ordinance was reasonable, fair amount of work went into it. Maybe we'll be able to resurrect it at some point. And the other thing I want to remind you is that you cannot regulate a CAFO after it has been proposed. You will have it, and they have them in northern counties, not just Bayfield. There's one in Iron County. The most remote forested county in the Northwoods has a CAFO. So it can be proposed. And once it's proposed, you can propose regulations after the fact. That's by Supreme Court decision. So
there is a risk.
it is a risk, and I will be the first to admit, I said when we started this, that it's pretty unlikely, but not outside the realm of possibility. And we will not be able to respond if there's something more than 1,000 animal units proposed.
For that
Strictly the state, and we have no input in it. Where it's located, how it's operated. I mean, we have the same input that anyone else has. So.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Any other comments?
One more thing, I'm sorry. The photos I provided in my testimony were 75,000. So the one thing we have to do on that is make sure that we work closely with the state to make sure, should some farmer come in, all the farmers are here good right now. Should some farmer come in and operate in that kind of manner, that our land conservation department, zoning department works with the state to make sure it's addressed in a timely manner. But once manure gets in your water system, it's hard to get out.
That was the farm with the Amish farm that was down by
It wasn't
Wausau?
Amish, it was just a regular farm.
Oh, okay. It's
It
down
just,
by
it was
Wausau?
a farmer that did not practice
Right.
the
You lost that
good
farm.
good practices that we currently have in our county, and you run into that. It happens. It's not here now, and with this 200 animal unit, you could have something like that. It's just a matter of working with the state to make sure it gets addressed in a timely way.
Okay, thank you. Items on next agenda, we'll have an update on education, whatever you come up with at that time. Any other items for the next agenda? Next meeting is going to be, I'm sorry, February 14th, Valentine's Day. You're right. We will celebrate Valentine's Day that day.
What that is, are we doing that?
That's at Nicolay, isn't it?
Nicolay?
It's been double booked at both places and I don't think that we have, John or I do not know which place the committee has decided to have it at this point.
Well, currently, the agenda lists that it will be at Nicolay College. If that changes, it will come back to the county boardroom.
Okay, I'll be attending by Zoom on that one.
I do need to let them know an approximate number of people that will be there in person. Just so I have a big enough room that we can be spaced.
8 to 10.
10, probably.
Mary,
All right,
do you have a room number? Because I can put that on the agenda if you like.
What's that?
If Mary has a room number, I can put that on the agenda. Otherwise, I'll just leave it Northwood Center.
208.
Is that the one to dividers, that classroom? Yeah, because we could spread out if we need to. Yep. Okay,
Just put on there 207, 208.
Perfect, thank you.
A bigger room, we can just go like out and open the divider.
all right, thank you very much. We're adjourned, stay warm. Thank you.
So quick question on US two, close to Superior, Wisconsin, talking about left ends. So is that why they're redoing some of those intersections? So when you turn, you're actually in a separate lane.
We had on Highway 23 in Fond du Lac County, we opened that highway, we had 4 people die in the first 2 weeks it was open. And the guy who bought a Cisco gas station, millions of dollars, it's still there, never opened it. Because he needs to have customers come in, but we'll do what's right to save lives because it's irreversible.
Remember, Mike always says, we're from the government, we're here to help.
Yeah.
Michelle,
Yeah.
We have an adult establishment ordinance.
I'm gonna hang around for a little bit. I need to talk to you.
Okay,
We do have an adult
So
establishment.
I will, why don't you call me when you're back at your desk?
okay.
Okay,
You can
thank
go ahead
you.
and shut down and I'll shut down here too.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, talk soon.
Down in,
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
State your name.
All right.
That's